All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to STEALTHYHunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
You're listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is James Payne.
And I'm Dalton Gray.
And I'm Mariah Humphreys.
And today we're going to be talking about a topic that we have gotten probably the most questions about, a specific species here in Alaska called the caribou.
Yes, sir.
And we've got many questions from listeners about this, mostly for DIY hunts and such. It's a very common DIY hunt for Alaska, honestly. So we're going to dive into a little bit about that, understanding the regs, understanding how to tell bull from cow, how to hunt them, ways not to hunt them. Go into all of that. And thank you to everybody that did write in and ask us questions about caribou. If you would like to write in with a question about just about anything Alaska related, you can head to our website. We have a nice contact button there at thenorthernhunter.com. You can also email us at info@thenorthernhunter.com, or you can hit us up at our socials. If you search at The Northern Hunter on either Facebook or Instagram, you will find us there. And while you're on the website, if you'd like to support what we're doing, you can go ahead and buy some really neat looking Northern Hunter merch that is now live on the website. You can go there. We have t-shirts, hoodies, hats, all of that if you would like to rep the logo. And we have more designs coming that we are working on, hopefully soon to be up on the website. And we have a nice partners page that you can shop at and help us out and help our sponsors out. And Dalton will tell you a little bit about those guys.
Yeah, so if you head over to our partners page, you can find, currently we work with 5 different companies, and we have discount codes through 4 out of the 5 companies that we work with currently. 3 of them all share the same discount code, just for ease of remembering all of them. For Stealthy Hunter and for Yukon River Knives and for Hammer Bullets, the discount code is the Northern Hunter. Of course, we've talked about the Stealthy Hunter equipment and all the Stealthy nutrition products, the rifle covers, the glassing pads, the first aid kits, and that they have a lot of great products there. So you can use the discount code from Stealthy Hunter and shop from Ryan Lamper's equipment there. Also, Yukon River Knives, you've got the Hunter, the small game, the ATK rifle, sling and knife combo kit, and then they've got a bunch of other knives as well. You get just a significant discount there as well with our discount code. And then also Hammer Bullets, you get a discount code off of any of your bullet needs there. And they are always expanding. They've got a lot of things in the works. Some new exciting stuff coming up here, hopefully in the next year or so that they're testing right now down in Australia. And but yeah, so currently you can find all of their existing lineup for sale on the hammerbullets.com. And we've talked about those before, but they seem to always be in stock.
Yep.
So you can order online directly from Hammer and use the Northern Hunter at checkout in your promo code box for a discount code there. And then we also work with Batum 907, all of our bear attractants and lures for bear baiting. And then if you need any trapping lures or moose hunting lures, Batum 907 is a local Alaska company, and you can use a discount code at checkout from us. If you type in TNHP, you get a discount code there from us as well. And then last but not least, our remaining partner is Weatherby Rifles in Sheridan, Wyoming. And no discount code there, but if you do decide to shop from Weatherby, let them know we sent you.
Absolutely. And I'll go a step farther and say, if you guys do purchase equipment from any of our sponsors, then you heard about them from the show, and you end up using it in the field, send us a photo.
Yeah.
We would love to see that. We'd love to hear about your success, hear about how you're liking the products and things like that, because we try to work with companies that we believe in and that we agree with. that they're functional, they're useful, and they're really good all-American companies. So,
Yes.
Man, I gotta say, fire season took a minute to kick in this year, but
It did, but it's here.
it is here,
It
man.
is definitely here.
If I sound a little off, it's because I spent 4 days up in Barrow,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no smoke up there.
Right.
And then when I came back, man, this smoke has been affecting me.
Does it really get to you?
Not usually, but I think just because it's been gone for so
Huh,
long.
interesting.
Normally, like the first week of smoke kind of makes my throat dry out and whatnot. But
Mhm.
So yeah,
once I get used to it,
this last week I was working and it was 90 degrees
mhm.
in the shade,
yeah,
and I was working in the sun installing some metal siding, and so it's just the sun just reflecting off the siding and just standing there and just dripping with sweat.
Yeah.
And I
Surprised you didn't
It
just
was-
shrivel up.
it was
Mariah.
that evening that I get home and I'm looking at the forecast and it's like it went past North Pole, but south of North Pole, like Eielson and especially Salsha got hit with 1.5 inch hail.
Oh, really?
And they had and we had a bunch of lightning and all that kind of stuff. It didn't, and it kind of spared North Pole and Fairbanks,
Mhm.
but all of a sudden, all that lightning, most of it was dry.
Yeah.
So that's why
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's fires everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard somewhere there's like, I think the last count I heard was like 14 different fires going on. And it might be more than that now, especially at the time that this
Right.
recording comes out.
I heard of 2 more that happened this afternoon that just started
Really?
just north of town.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for anybody listening that doesn't know Alaska's fire season, we very commonly have a lot of forest fires up here.
Mhm.
Much of Alaska burns every year, sometimes millions of acres.
Yeah.
And you don't really hear about it a whole lot because a lot of it's out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
There's no villages, there's no towns, there's no anything. So in those situations,
Just let it burn.
just let it burn.
Yeah.
Unless there's, unless it is encroaching a dangerous
Well,
area.
Right,
There's
right.
a lot of areas where there might be a group of cabins
Mhm.
along a river where we'll go try to protect those or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
But,
So as of the 4th, it says there was 157. Here we go. No, here's a currently information: 284 fires in Alaska.
really?
Yep.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and most of those are local, less than 10 acres,
Mhm.
I think, and then there's you got local and moderate.
Well,
large and then
that's the
very
weird
large.
thing is up until I think like this last couple of weeks, maybe just this last week, this was one of the best fire years we've had in a
yeah.
long time.
I think it's
yeah.
because
I mean,
it stayed cool and wet for a while.
it really did.
And
yeah.
I mean, it's when the heat comes that it brings in the lightning storms. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember last year, it warmed up a lot faster than it did this year.
Right.
I mean, the breakup still took a little while to kick in, but once it did, it came in full force.
fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say this year, I will say for people listening, this is about 2 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks from when you'll be hearing this
Mhm.
episode is when we're recording.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there might be a lot more by then, or maybe they managed to burn themselves out. But,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Could definitely use some rain right about now, but I know that's coming right around the corner anyway. It's almost August. By the time this comes out, it will be August. And
Yeah.
usually that's when our rainy season starts. So, on the grand scheme of things, compared to what we've had in past years, even
Yeah.
if the fires are terrible for 2 or 3 weeks, it's not going to last all that
Mhm.
long.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
so it's not going to be nearly as bad as it has been.
Mhm.
But like you said, going from no smoke all summer until the end of July, until Fairbanks is affected,
yeah.
we've been pretty fortunate in that
Oh,
regard.
absolutely. It's definitely weird. But
Yeah.
It's been kind of nice.
it
I'm not,
has
I'm
been
not
really
complaining.
nice.
I'm not complaining.
You know, last year I was working construction and we almost got smoked out of a couple job sites.
Really?
Yeah.
Just because the air quality was so bad. I mean, you couldn't see a couple hundred yards.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so.
yeah.
But last year I feel was a real bad fire year.
Yeah.
I don't know the actual statistics or the numbers, but
Right.
just
But just how
anecdotally.
Fairbanks and locally,
yeah,
we
Right.
had a lot of
anecdotally,
smoke.
it seemed like a really bad
Yeah.
fire year.
Well, and Fairbanks is in the middle Tanana Valley. It's just kind of stagnant. We don't tend to get a whole lot of wind.
Right.
There's
yeah.
wind in every direction around us, but we are in kind of it's the middle Tanana Valley.
Mhm.
And so it just tends to kind of come in and just settle and it doesn't go anywhere for a while. So,
Right.
Yeah. A stiff breeze around here might flutter a piece of paper.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's probably, I mean, a big reason why the trees are the way that they are.
Yeah.
But every time we do get a stiff gust of wind around here,
They fall over.
Yeah, you get them
Yeah.
falling over and knocking power lines
Yeah.
over.
Power's out, the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to kick this one off, Mo, you found an interesting article that
I
ties
did.
into something we did.
And we talked about this. Dalton and I talked about this.
Mhm. The episode I missed.
One of the episodes you missed.
Yep.
And the title of this article is Alaska Game Managers Dispute Study Saying Predator Control Does Work. So the study said that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the big game managers are saying that it does. So this is on Alaska Public Media.
They could have done a better job with that title. I'm just going to put that on the record.
Yeah, I remember finding the article and reading it, and then when I went to look at it again today, I was like, "Wait, is this what I'm saying? What I think it's saying?"
What episode did you and I talk about that on?
That was the
good
"Don't believe
question.
everything you read on the internet"
That's right.
episode.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
That one,
That's right.
or I think it's don't trust everything you read on the internet.
Yeah, maybe that was it. I wasn't here, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
All right. So I mean, state game managers are pushing back on research that says Alaska's predator control programs don't work. There's a paper by retired state biologists and a University of Alaska Fairbanks professor that says harvests did not improve following predator control. So I think that was some of what we were reading was referencing. Now, this article is specifically a interview done by Casey Grove, who works for Alaska Public Media with at least one wildlife manager in Alaska. And basically what he says is, if you look at the history, kind of like what we were talking about, and it's kind of, there's not a lot, there's a lot to read through here, but basically he says, if you look at the history, it does show that it has worked. And there are cases where it may not be the best solution, or it may not work, or it may not even be needed, but most of the time it has shown to increase cervid reproductive rate and or survival rate and herd size.
Yep. Well, and the one thing I like about this article, reading through it quickly, is part of that article, and the part that really kind of screamed out to me that I really disagreed with, I mean, other than the entire thing, was when they said that intensive management was controversial. And I think I made a comment on that when I came back to the show. And I like that he points out in the interview, when asked about that, that intensive management laws came about in 1994.
Right.
After several decades of research in the interior, South and South Central had looked at the effects of wolf and bear predation on moose and caribou populations. So it was not a willy-nilly decision that they made.
Right.
It was not something that they just came up with out of thin air. This is something that took a long time to figure out, okay, this is what helps. This is what fixes this particular situation. And it's been around for 20 years. That style of management's been around for 20 years. So it just shows a level of ignorance in the person that was writing the original article about the understanding of how Alaska's wildlife management system actually works.
So one of the other things I saw in this current article, and the guy interviewed was Tom Piragi. I believe I'm saying his name right. He said, and this is at the end of the article, but he says, the intent behind the intensive management is to increase harvest of moose, caribou, and deer in areas where it's important for human use and where it's been documented through a long history of use. But the values, everybody weighs in on the values, and it's through the political process that those values get decided.
Right.
So, he's basically saying intensive management, wildlife management is science informed. The people's values aren't. And that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah,
if you have a problem with hunting in general, you're not going to like this.
Right.
And most of what a lot of those articles and stuff were, it was very politically based. And not
correct.
And not scientific based, because it's a lot better for the game population. And I mean, and he mentions in here how they have studies that show when you kill predators, you kill a large amount of predators in an area, it increases the population of the moose, deer, or elk, or all of the above, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
Did I say elk?
You did say
caribou
elk.
and deer. I guess it could work for elk, on some
I'm
of
sure
the islands.
it would.
Yeah. It probably really would, honestly. But if you went on those islands and killed a bunch of bears. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, he says, and then what you can watch is it will increase their populations. And after a few years, you'll watch the population start to decrease again when the predators start to move back in just a few years, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, honestly, the natural balance of things. It's predators will eat themselves out of an area, just the same way as when we talked about how caribou herds are cyclic, and they'll get blown up 10, 20 times in the herd size, and then they'll eat out all the food in an area, and then next thing you know, now they're dying off of starvation.
Right.
Predators don't have any more of a food control or of an eating control system as ungulates do, right? They're just going to eat and kill.
They're
In
going
a
to
lot
kill
of
them all
cases,
till they're gone.
like with wolves, they'll kill for sport.
Right.
And so they'll kill them till they're gone, and then they'll move on to the next herd and do the same thing.
And then the 5 that are left can slowly reproduce.
Right.
Right.
And the other thing I like about what he pointed out in this article is the he addressed the concerns that, well, it's the harsh winters and whatnot that do it. It's not the predator management and this, that, the other. And he points out a study, and maybe we can link this article somewhere
I can put it in the description.
Yeah, in the description. Yeah, for anybody that wants to read it. But he talks about a study where they did predator management in certain areas where they had the same basic winters. Right, it's in the same mountain range, the same conditions, the same snow pattern, same cold. And in certain areas, they did predator management. And I believe he's talking specifically about a moose area here.
Right.
And in certain areas, they didn't. And regardless of the winter conditions, whether it was harsh winters or not harsh winters, they still saw an uptick in production and survival rate of calves and everything like that, where they did the predator management.
Right.
Now, obviously, harsh winters and things like that still play a role and will kill off some animals. I mean, sometimes they just don't survive, especially if we have like a midwinter rain like we did that one year.
Right.
That's really hard on the big animals, especially like moose. But just, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You know, if you look back on Alaska wildlife management systems, I mean, this is decades of data.
It is, yeah.
And as far back as they've been, you know, and the decades of data that we have based on this style of management was based on decades of research prior to that for them developing this research or for this management style. And I think it shouldn't get to a point where they need to do this. If people were doing a better job at predator management ourselves too.
Oh yeah.
I think when we're out looking for caribou, when we're out looking for moose, I mean, we've talked about it on the show a bunch, but if you do, you know, I'm not saying target them specifically,
right?
But if you get an opportunity, you know, it's more of an opportunistic target,
right?
Don't skip out on it. You know, so, you could be saving, and the numbers go, you know, all over the place on how many moose you're saving per wolf or how many caribou you're saving per wolf, and you can look at a bunch of different studies and get different numbers. But I mean, you could technically be saving like a dozen caribou per se, you know, rough number. If you take out even just one wolf. And it's a really important thing, I think, for our natural resources, for us to continue, especially as more people are coming up and wanting to use these resources.
Right.
You know, we've got to manage it a little bit better than we used to.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention, it's not an expensive tag. I'm not sure how much it is, but it's not an expensive tag
for a non-resident.
They can get a wolf tag over the counter when they come up here.
Right.
And just about anywhere in the state, they'll be able to shoot a wolf. When they're hunting, right?
Yeah.
In the fall.
In the fall.
In the fall, yeah. I believe they open up in August, same as everything else. In most places. I think some areas are September, but
that's always look at the regs.
Always look at the regs.
You know, and the reason we point out the wolves thing, like, because a lot of guys I've heard this story a lot where, oh, well, you know, we're moose hunting, and if I shoot a wolf, it's a gunshot. It might scare away the moose.
Right. That wolf is going to do a better job of running moose out than
4 years ago now. I don't remember when it was. I shot my first. It was moose season. I shot a wolf, and it was right in the area that we watched where moose moved through. And I shot the wolf there. We went down. We hauled it up. I skinned it out. 2 days later, somebody else in the hunting party shot a moose almost like 100 yards from where I shot that wolf.
Yeah.
And it's actually been interesting to see when you shoot a wolf out of an area, the wolf pack a lot of times will move off because they sense danger, and the moose will come in. So it's not going to decrease your chances.
Right.
But there is a good chance it will increase your chances.
Right.
And 100% kill the wolves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Kill the bears if you can't. You know, I'm just as much ready to target a grizzly bear or a wolf on a moose hunt, especially if I'm on a moose hunt with 5 or 6 people. And everybody's got a moose tag. I will bust my butt to go shoot a wolf or a bear if the opportunity presents itself. Because they're going to shoot the moose, right? I'm not, you know, we're going to get the meat.
Right.
You know, that's the way I feel about it. It's not necessarily what I'm there to hunt until it shows up, and then that's what I'm there to hunt,
right?
If I can.
And for anybody cringing in the lower 48 that hasn't heard our prior episodes about this, we're not talking about Idaho or Montana numbers up here. There are north of, 13 to 15,000 wolves in this state that they've estimated.
I don't remember what that number is.
It's north of that number. There's over 30,000 grizzly bears in this state.
I think,
and over 100,000 black bears.
So Dalton and I would agree on this.
The latest numbers that they've published.
Yeah.
And our guess is there's actually a lot more than that.
Oh, absolutely, there are. Absolutely.
So it's not, when we say, you know, definitely go kill the wolves, definitely go kill the bears, it's not that we're working with limited numbers. They're not endangered up here.
No,
they're not. This is not a
And they're not endangered in most of the lower 48 states either.
No, they're not.
They're not.
It's a political thing down there, too.
That's true, but
It's all parts.
I'm thousands of miles away, so I try to
but I
stick with what I know.
I have a lot of trustworthy sources and other people that hunt and live down there, and they say the exact same thing that we do up here. There is no shortage of them, and any opportunity you get within, obviously, your legal bounds, you ought to be shooting predators.
I know that every year, I've been watching this and hearing more and more about it, but it seems every year the human and grizzly encounters in the greater Yellowstone area get more and more.
Well, somebody just got killed, what, last week?
Yeah, last week.
This lady got found on a trailhead.
A couple weeks ago by the time this comes out, but
happens every year.
Yep.
Multiple times.
And I mean, and it's, not even hunters.
Mm-mm.
There's people that are getting mauled just walking around looking for rocks and sheds and fossils and who knows anything else, But it's actually a big thing down there.
It's a big thing. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's a big thing down there.
What kind of rocks are these people looking for?
I mean, for one, they're looking for fossils in the rocks. You can find those. They're looking for different types of rocks. I mean,
it's volcanic area, so they have different kinds of rocks.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a podcast that everybody would probably know if I mentioned it, but one of the big guys on that podcast, he calls himself a rock hound, and he'll post pictures of rocks on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, what kind of rock is this?
Yeah.
Well, I must not be familiar with that. I always jokingly tell people, but it's not joking. It's dead serious. I can drive by a mountain and have zero inclination to climb that mountain. But if you put a Dall sheep on that mountain, or a grizzly bear, or a black bear, or a caribou, man, I can't hit my brakes fast enough, Right. I have zero interest in going out and climbing mountains and putting out all that
effort.
Just to do it. I don't know.
People will do it.
I have no interest in ever climbing Mount McKinley, which, yes, that's what it's called. It's not Mount Denali. It will forever be Mount McKinley in my mind.
Most Alaskans would call it that.
But if you put a world record sheep on Mount McKinley and opened up a governor's tag for it, heck yeah, I'd put in for it and try to go hunt it. Or Mount Everest, all these guys that die climbing Mount Everest.
They were all highly motivated at one point.
For what? Just to climb it? I mean,
but I would dare to say,
you're not even the first guy to do it.
A lot more people in the world have shot Dall sheep on top of mountains than have climbed Mount Everest or Mount Denali, for that matter. McKinley.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of people that go up Everest these days.
I don't know, man.
Like they have like just trails of people that go up there with the guides. It's actually kind of disturbing when you watch the video footage of what it looks like in modern times.
The crazy part about that kind of stuff to me is that there are literally frozen graveyards of bodies up there.
Oh yeah, they don't pull the bodies
that
off.
are never going to be able to be recovered.
Yeah,
they are up there until an avalanche happens or until they just get buried. People literally walk over them up the mountain.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that you would just go through that risk just to climb a mountain. And that's just such a different mindset to me.
I think it's just whatever you like. I mean,
yeah.
Because honestly, I'm sure there's tons of people that would be like the same thing where why would you risk that just to get a sheep?
Yeah.
And it's,
yeah.
And arguably that's a big reason, like, I haven't done much sheep hunting in my life.
Yeah.
And that's a big reason is because I look more at meat yield than anything. And there's not a whole lot of meat yield on a Dall sheep. That's more of a self-challenge thing.
So since I brought it up,
and so it's more about what you chase. Yeah, it's more about what turns your wheels.
Right. So since I brought it up,
okay,
how many Dall sheep are killed a year in Alaska approximately? 800 to 1,000. It's been a little lower recently, but 800 to 1,000 is pretty common.
Okay,
yearly.
I'm gonna have to fact check that.
I already did.
I don't know.
That's what he's been doing.
To this point, as of January this year, 6,338 people have climbed Mount Everest and reached the summit.
Really?
Yeah. So more folks have killed Dall sheep.
Oh yeah, by a long shot.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's not even including Yukon and BC. And
right.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
I would have thought it'd be a lot more than that going up. But
Everest.
Still,
that's
I'm sure there's a lot more that have
people.
gone up. But how many people make it to the top?
That's very true.
And there's a lot more people that go on a sheep hunt than kill a sheep.
That's very true.
Now, 35,000 people have attempted to summit McKinley, but only a few. I don't want to know a few reach the top. How many people have reached the summit?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
But either way, you can compare it however you want. but we have a large number of predators in the state.
Yes.
And so
Back
just
to that.
keep that in mind if you're in the lower 48 listening to this and you're hearing us talk
Yeah.
about predator management in a way that may seem a little flippant to people in the lower 48. It's because we have a very, very different population density than there.
And I feel like we should address this particular mindset that we have about predator management.
Mhm.
There are a lot of guys in the lower 48 that really enjoy bear hunting just for the sake of bear hunting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just because they like it, they like the meat, and they don't look at it through the eyes of predator management,
Yeah.
right? We do, because we have a very different system up here.
Mhm.
Our I don't know if it's an ecosystem or however you want to label it that we have here in Alaska. We have hard and fast data proving that our bears kill a lot of ungulate species.
Yeah.
A
Mhm.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands and thousands a year die to just bears,
Yeah.
not even including wolves. In the lower 48, a lot of these mountain bears, for the most part, black bears is what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
A lot of those bears might not kill a lot of deer because deer don't live out there, right? Some of these, and now occasionally, sure, they'll kill an elk or a deer here and there,
Mhm.
but some of these bears grow old and die, and they might not kill that many ungulate species in their lifetime. They're eating roots and plants and berries, and
They're just foraging.
yeah. They're just herbivores basically. But our system is different up here. Now, obviously, throughout different parts of Alaska, certain pockets of populations have a
Mhm.
different diet than others. And if there is a moose-rich population, you can put your money on it
Mhm.
that they are killing moose if there
Yeah.
are an
Mhm.
abundant population of moose in their area. If there aren't, maybe that population of bears only eats berries and ground squirrels and roots and things like that.
Right.
For the most part. Not saying that they won't be opportunistic if a caribou or a moose walks through their area,
Mhm.
but for the most part, they might only be eating plants and maybe the occasional ground squirrel if they can find it.
Yeah.
However, the vast majority of the state is inhabited with abundant ungulate species.
Mhm.
And when that is the case, there are bears and they do attack the prey animals.
Yeah.
110%. That is what happens.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we have the data to back that up.
We do.
And so for us, we harp on predator management and we look at it as a direct benefit and long-term help to our species that we like to hunt for meat.
Mhm.
Because every predator that we kill has a direct relation and result on the ungulate species that we want to hunt.
Yeah.
That's why we have bear bait.
Yep.
That's why we take any opportunity we can to shoot bears and wolves even in the fall.
Mhm.
And some guys, that they are hardcore bear baiters and they say, well, I don't want to shoot a grizzly bear in the fall because then I can't shoot one over spring on my
Right.
bait station because it's the same hunting year.
Yeah.
From July 1st to June 30th is our hunting flip over year
Mhm.
for bears. So from that perspective, in my mind, I don't care.
Yeah.
If I have a grizzly bear that I can kill in September while I'm
Mhm.
moose hunting, I'm going to shoot it
Yeah.
because I don't have the guarantee that it's going to work out to kill one over a bait in May or June.
Right.
Right. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, I'm going to make the direct impact now rather than hope that I can have fun and shoot one next spring.
Mhm.
That's just my perspective. But a lot of guys think that way, that bear bait. They think,
Yeah,
well,
that's true.
I don't really want to bear bait. And I don't really want to go spot and stalk bear hunting in the fall because then I might not be able to bear bait as much in the
Yeah.
spring.
Well, and I feel like a lot of that has less to do with the fun of shooting one in the spring over
Yeah.
your bait and more the necessity of maybe needing to if it comes in and starts running the black bears off.
Right.
Because now you're stuck just trying to run it off
Well-
rather than being able to actually take it out of the equation.
I've got a lot of solutions to run grizzly bears off of bear bait.
Well, I mean,
Right.
One of them worked really well this
Right,
year.
You know,
there are ways to do it
growing up
Yeah.
legally, I
in
might
a
add.
bear baiting, in a huge bear baiting family,
Mm.
I would say I could definitely see somebody doing it because they want to hunt bears in the spring and they would rather do that
Oh,
than
I'm
the
sure.
fall.
I'm not saying that's
And-
there's not the
and-
motivation for
and-
that.
Right. And even just
but-
doing it for the fun of it. However, I would think that I would say that most of the people who are going to say, well, I really don't want to shoot one in the fall because it'll ruin my spring hunt. A lot of those guys do kill a grizzly bear most every spring. Not all of them.
One of them that I know that says that kills one almost every year.
Okay.
One of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know several guys that say that. Well, I don't want to shoot a grizzly bear in the fall because then if I get one on my bait in the spring, then I can't shoot it.
Right. Yeah.
And only one of those guys that says that.
Yeah.
And I think we all know who I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
Only one of them is consistent at killing grizzly bears.
Mhm.
So for him, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's, maybe he's cracked the magic code and he killed another big grizzly bear this year.
Oh,
He-
yeah.
He killed
He
a
did.
smoker.
You did.
But most guys don't have that kind of repeatable success
Mhm.
year after year
Right.
after year.
Yeah.
And even he has to bust his bones to kill a grizzly bear every year. I mean,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
sitting night after night after night for 10, 12 hours just to kill a
Mhm.
grizzly bear every year.
Right.
That's a lot of work. And it might not work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might not happen. So anyway, I say all that to say this. You have 3 black bear tags in most of the areas that you're going to bear bait.
Mhm.
5 and
Some 5 black bear
Yeah.
tag areas, right? And to me, most guys, I mean, realistically speaking, how many guys every spring kill 3 black bears minimum over a bear bait?
Like percentage?
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
You think it's that low?
It can't be that high.
It's
The
not, I'm
num-
not saying
with
it's that high,
With
but
the number of bear
1%?
baiters, the number of bear baiters,
Yeah.
the number of baits I have walked in on and seen their setup, and
Yeah.
I know they haven't even had a bear on their bait because they don't know what they're doing. Yet they put all the money into it and try every year.
Which is fine.
I would just like to
Yeah.
believe people are more successful.
But well, to kill 3 black bears
That does take a
on
lot.
your tag.
That does take a
right?
lot. Yeah.
Because I know
Yeah.
if any of us have a bait that's that productive,
Yeah.
unless we, if I kill 2 black bears on a bait, I'm going to be going, James Dalton, are you guys like not doing
Yeah.
good? You want to come, you need to come
Right.
kill a bear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm opening it
And
up
if
to
it's not
somebody
you guys,
else.
I'm going to have my
Right.
wife in there. I'm going to have
Right.
another buddy.
Right.
Because
I'm a-
share hunt it.
Because to be honest with you, after 2 bears, my
Mhm.
freezer is full
Right.
Yeah.
in the springtime.
It is.
Don't get me wrong. If I had the opportunity and it just worked out, then okay, I probably would. But man, I'd have to have a lot of bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Right.
because I got my cameraman that was working with me this year. I wanted to get him to kill a bear because if he kills a bear, he's going to have a passion for it now, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure he probably does anyways. Because I can tell you for a lot of people, the passion of baiting is not just the killing,
Mhm.
but also just the doing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the work you put in. It's getting out in the woods in the spring. It's having fun. But before we go too far down this rabbit hole,
That's a good point there. Yeah.
I want to wrap this back with one last fact, and then we'll move on to our actual topic here. But the article the article we're talking about today is disputing the article you two talked about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And just to wrap that up into comparison's sake, there are 5 different sub ecosystems in the lower 48 they're trying to recover grizzly bears in. Is that correct? 4 or 5? Somewhere in there.
Couldn't tell you.
It's somewhere. There's not a whole lot. I mean, it's big areas. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
and in some of those areas, they in years past have been pushing for, let's just get 50 bears
Yeah.
back in this area.
Yeah.
Let's just get 50 grizzlies back in this ecosystem, and we'll consider them on their way to being recovered.
Yeah.
The original article that you two talked about in that episode,
Yeah.
Fish and Game biologists took out 94 grizzlies
In 17
that
days.
were only the grizzlies hunting that particular caribou herd.
That's right.
They were watching over the herd and only shooting the bears that were coming in to predate on that particular herd.
And only
And
over like
that-
17 days.
And only over 17 days. And
Yeah.
that probably didn't put a dent
Right.
in the population of bears in that area.
Exactly.
So comparative sake, you have entire ranges in the lower 48 that they're just trying to get 50 bears in.
Yeah.
And these guys killed almost double that. That was just hunting one caribou herd
For just over 2 weeks.
for just over 2 weeks.
yeah.
Our population of bears is different up here.
Yes.
Mhm.
So understand that when we're talking about it and when we're advising other people to do it, and when you are out on a hunt too, if you live up here or you're
Mhm.
able to shoot a grizzly,
Yeah.
whether with a guide or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
if you have some next of kin you're coming up to hunt with,
Yeah.
definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And so with that, we'll take a quick break and then we'll dive into caribou.
Okay.
Hammer Bullets produces what we at the Northern Hunter consider to be the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are easy to load, extremely accurate, and best of all, they're always in stock and ready to ship. The guys at Hammer designed them so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, it sheds its petals, initiating a massive energy dump while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration. These bullets are built with 100% focus on how they perform on game, and their proprietary designs produce great BCs with specialized pressure grooves for amazing inherent accuracy and speed. They have a minimum expansion velocity of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots, but with no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity round like the Weatherby 30-378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com and use discount code TheNorthernHunter to drop the hammer on your next adventure.
So I've got to say, caribou are by far, I'm not going to say they're my favorite to hunt, but they are by far my favorite deer species. I think caribou they look cool, they act cool, they're just cool creatures, man.
So how many deer species do we have in Alaska, just for folks that don't know?
3, if I remember right. We got the moose, we got the caribou, and we got the black-tailed deer.
Now, do we consider the invasive whitetails and muleys?
No, because as much their picture might show up in the regs book, but they're not recognized as an Alaskan species. So for those,
because they're non-native,
yeah, and there's no designated season for them other than
shoot on site,
open all year long.
Right?
Yeah, shoot on site. They're invasive. Now, at some point, I actually probably wouldn't be against the idea of them migrating up here permanently. I mean, it would just offer one more opportunity, but it depends on how that would factor into other ecosystems. But
I've heard that they're really concerned about whitetails and muleys bringing up CWD to Alaska, though.
Oh, I can see that. Because, we don't have that problem up here for the most part. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of a single case up here.
I haven't heard of it.
But for caribou, one thing I think is so cool about them is they actually have the biggest antlers per body size of any deer species.
Right.
And another cool factor is that the males and the females have antlers, which I believe they're the only ones that do that as well, outside of a couple of really small deer species.
Yeah.
And so that can be really cool to look at. It can also make it really confusing if you're a non-resident hunter, because in almost every part of the state, non-residents are restricted to bull only. And I believe that's true outside of maybe designated regulation hunts. I would have to double check that.
Okay.
But I think there are some regulation hunts where you can shoot either or, if that's what...
As a non-resident?
I think so. Like, I don't know 100% what the rules are for the 40 mile.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people hunt that I don't think are residents.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure.
But
I'm pretty sure that the 40 mile and the Nelchina herd, and at least most of the herds up north that I know of, are bull only.
Are bull only.
For non-resident?
And that's been my assumption.
Yeah.
The whole time. And the regulation hunts might be the one exception. It is my only thing. So look into that for sure.
Right. For sure.
No, caribou are just awesome, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think, just, and a lot of people say they're kind of just silly animals that wander around and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool too, actually. I think when you look at how far they travel in like a single day, and like they just roam everywhere, man. And you got herds that are going into Alaska, back into Canada, back into Alaska, and you got some herds that are more residential. Man, they're just cool critters. I think they're awesome.
Alaska only has barren ground caribou, for folks that don't know. In Canada, they have woodland caribou and they have mountain caribou, which are considered different species than barren ground caribou. However, in some parts, there are localized herds of caribou that kind of just stay in the mountains pretty much year round. Now, obviously, they'll move around through the winter to different wintering grounds, but they'll pretty much stay in the mountains all winter.
Yeah.
They don't like migrate hundreds and hundreds of miles like some of the other herds do in the state.
Yeah.
And even though they stay in the mountains, they're still considered barren ground species, which is a little bit confusing, but that's just what Alaska calls them, is just all barren ground caribou as a species.
Now, for non-residents, I'd say this is probably the most common DIY hunt we've heard of since starting this show.
Yeah.
And the most common one, I would say black bear's up there too.
Yeah.
Black bear's definitely up there too, but caribou for sure.
Black-tailed deer is another real popular one.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
probably percentage-wise of DIY hunters in Alaska from out of state, I would say over half are probably
say
going to be
even-
caribou hunts.
Even resident hunters, really. I mean, I know a lot of guys that go after caribou that really don't try to do anything else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just for
Well,
the meat.
and part of that, well, one, you get a decent harvest of meat, but two is probably ease of access
Mhm.
as well, which
Right.
we'll talk about a little bit later.
and the abundance of game.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So skipping through some units here, there's definitely some units. Some are harvest tickets, some are registration, but that have one caribou for resident and non-resident, both. Some of them.
So,
Okay. For the registration
bull,
tags.
Yeah. Bull or cow.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
of them do. So some of them are registration, some of them are harvest ticket. But yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
And for anybody that's new to reading the Alaska regs, typically speaking, if they just state the name of the species,
Mhm.
so like any caribou, one caribou, one moose, something like that, that would be a weird one.
yeah, probably
But
not going to
probably
happen.
not going to happen. But like if it does state that, one bear, something like that,
Mhm.
it's speaking to both
yeah.
sexes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've got bull or bull or cow,
Yeah.
boar or sow, either one.
Right.
Like
Right.
if it doesn't specify, then
Yes.
you're usually able to shoot both.
Mhm.
Right.
And then in a lot of cases, you'll see in the regs, it'll break it down into a lot of individual lines,
Mhm.
even in the same units, even in the same
Right.
in the same animal. And you'll have to look at the bottom of the reg book, but it does specify. I believe it's R for resident, N for non-resident, B for both.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then it'll just have different colored lines, different regulations, and so
Different
definitely
season
make sure you're
times.
you're double checking.
Yep.
Because sometimes if you look quickly, you might see an area that says any caribou, but that might be under just the R for residents.
Right.
Mhm.
So make sure if you're coming up here visiting for a DIY hunt that you're checking into that.
Right.
I don't know if there's a more
But-
diverse set of regulations than caribou in some of the areas. of the state.
yeah,
Yeah.
they do get pretty diverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of differences.
So Mo.
Yeah.
When does caribou season open?
Well, the 40 mile this year is the 10th, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
In most parts of the state, caribou opens August 10th,
Mhm.
alongside with Dall sheep and well, I guess deer opens the 1st, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Dall sheep and caribou both open on the 10th, and in most cases that will go through September,
Mhm.
sometimes into October. I think the 40-mile hunt has ventured into October before.
The 40-mile herd stayed open, what was it, 2 years ago, all the way into like March?
Yeah.
Because you and I went out in February
We
and it
did.
was still open.
Well, so they have the winter hunt,
Mhm.
which are two different registration tags. So
Right,
they have the
okay,
fall hunt and
yes.
the winter hunt.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, you're
and
right.
some, in most cases, they'll take a break
Mhm.
in October and I believe
Uh,
early November.
To
Usually
kind of
and then it
count
opens.
up. Right.
Yeah,
Right, well, they take a break
to do
in
a recount.
September during moose season.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, they started doing that, didn't
Yes.
they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot
Yes.
about that. I think they just
Yes.
started that a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was too much competition in the area.
Too many people
Yeah.
shooting
Yeah.
it.
Now I believe isn't that just for one unit, or not one unit, but that
One
that
zone?
section up there. I think it was just zone 3.
It
Was
may
it?
have been. I don't remember specifically. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
figure it
But
out.
again,
I don't know. It's
check
been
the
a couple of
regulations.
years.
Yeah.
But in most cases, yeah, your caribou hunting is going to take place in the fall time,
Yep.
a little bit before moose season, and then
Yep.
in many areas through moose season.
Right.
Another tricky thing about the regs is in certain units you cannot hold a moose and a caribou tag.
Right.
Mhm.
You can only hold one or the other. In
Yep.
some units, you can hold both. So
Yep.
definitely keep an eye on that too if
Mhm.
you're in a new area.
Yes.
And then in a lot of cases, in a lot of areas, there is a winter hunt as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that'll normally carry through into March.
Yeah.
The end of March, typically, unless the bag limit gets filled.
Right. Right.
So
And so, just for folks that aren't familiar with this particular management style, they have registration permits that are unlimited to acquire.
yes,
So you can go online, get your registration permit, or go into Fish and Game, get your permit, and then when you harvest a caribou, you have to report that kill within what is it like
3 days.
3 days
Mhm.
of the
Something
kill.
like that, yeah.
Yep.
You have to call it in to the caribou hotline and tell them that you killed a caribou, and then file a harvest report online
Mm-hmm.
so that they can have as quick of a tally as to how many caribou are being killed in real time.
Yeah.
And then they have quotas that if they meet their quota by, let's just say August 20th, 10 days into season, then just like that, they shut it down
Yeah.
and it's over.
Yeah.
And then when they shut it down, they'll take a month or two off, reevaluate the herd, see how many are kind of left, see how many overkill there are, as much as we hate to think about it. We'll get into this here in a little bit, but there is always more animals killed in the hunting season than there actually are tagged and reported, whether that's poor shots and they just run off and die. Things like that do happen. Shoot throughs. They kill two caribou, 2 animals, and they don't report the second one. They don't harvest it, or it runs off and dies somewhere. They don't know about it. However that happens, they account for overharvest. Then they do a reassessment, and then they might open the winter hunt based off of the fall quota that was met. And if the fall quota wasn't met, then they can reopen the winter hunt and leave that remaining one to be shot. And that's what the purpose of the registration hunts are. Harvest tickets, you don't have to report as quickly,
correct, yeah,
as the registration permits. And this is just because they want to know as quickly as possible how many animals are being shot.
Right.
Because there's so many of them that get shot so fast.
It's more of a reactive management system. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And a lot of that depends on how close the herd comes to the roadways and how the access is. If the caribou hang out in a zone that's hard to get at, then not a lot of folks can get to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can be a lot more difficult of a hunt that way.
But. And in a lot of cases, you'll see the units that have a harvest ticket for caribou are those harder to get to ones because they're not worried about too many people going out there and slaughtering the herd because just not that many people are going to go through that much effort. Right. Where you're really going to see the registration and the subsistence tiers come in, your tier 1, tier 2 hunts.
Right.
Is when it is road system access or fairly easy trail access.
Right.
And if you're a non-resident and you see something that's labeled tier 1, tier 2,
it's not for you.
That's not for you. That is for residents of that area. Alaska still has subsistence hunting privileges in certain areas if you live in an area. Now, some of the tier 1 hunts are pretty widespread. You can get a tier 1 hunt even if you live in Fairbanks in some cases, in some units. In most cases, like they've shut it down since due to emergency order, but even residents of Fairbanks were able to apply for the Nilchina herd tier 1 subsistence hunt. Now, if that sounds unfair, what that also does is when you say you want to go hunt a subsistence caribou from that herd, you are also limiting your moose to hunting in that area as well. And so oftentimes they will equate your hunting opportunity as if you were part of that unit. And the reason for that is there's just not a whole lot of people that live, directly in that unit, especially it's a super widespread unit. I mean, I think 13 is probably one of the biggest ones. So, and so there's a lot of area in there where you can subsistence hunt. Now, they've had some pretty bad winters, some pretty bad predation. The numbers have plummeted. I think the caribou migrated into a new wintering ground too and got mistaken for a different herd. And that actually
they've kind of pocketed out. I've heard some recent information about new pockets of caribou that have left the Nilchina herd area.
Really?
And that they are in a completely different area. And now, and this is all secondhand information, but from what I've been told, those little satellite groups, a few hundred here, a few hundred there, those are gone from the Nilchina herd in the eyes of Fish and Game. Now, I'm going to do some more homework into this to verify it, and we'll definitely revisit this at some point. But to my knowledge, when those animals break off, they are now not considered a part of the main herd, so they don't get counted in that. So they count that as the main herd losing numbers, right? So they looked at that. They looked at the predation. They looked at the harvest numbers over the years, and they looked at what's left in the Nilchina traditional herd zone.
Right.
And they said, well, there's not enough of them. So they didn't give out any tags this year at all.
Yep.
Not even subsistence permits.
Which does hurt.
Oh, it hurts a lot of folks.
I don't hunt that subsistence hunt, but I know that, a lot of the people that live down there in those smaller communities, they don't have the same opportunities that everybody else does as far as traveling around.
Right.
Those of us that live in Fairbanks or Anchorage area, we're able to jump in our trucks and go pretty much wherever we want.
Yeah. 6 hours in any direction and we're hundreds of miles from home and we can hunt a totally different area.
Right. Yeah. When you're living in a more kind of limited area, which as freeing as that can be, comes with its limitations of travel sometimes.
Right.
Those people really shouldn't have to drive 6 hours away
I totally agree
from
with
their
you.
homesteads
Yeah.
to be able to hunt. So, I mean,
completely
that does
agree.
hurt that they had to shut that down, but it does go to show the management style of Alaska. I mean,
Right.
they're only going to allow tags for what they have a harvestable surplus of.
Right.
So they are keeping a close eye on things. And I as much as that does hurt, I applaud them for having the ability to do that,
Yeah.
the strength to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of brings us to our next point pretty good, which is always double checking the hunt limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just stated, the Nilchina herd got shut down for emergency order.
Mm-hmm.
Emergency orders are a thing that happen up here fairly frequently.
Especially with caribou.
Especially with caribou. They are constantly doing checks and double checks and kind of health updates on these herds.
Mm-hmm.
And if something turns south, they're going to shut it down quickly. Several years ago with the Nilchina herd, when it kind of first started splitting apart like that, they cut it down. I believe they gave out, I think it was 2,000 draw tags for that herd. And after that winter had come through, because you apply for your draw tags the year prior, and then they go through the winter, and then you get your draw tags in the spring, or I guess late winter
Yeah.
here. And so then when they did their recount in the summertime, they realized how bad the population was getting. They cut it from 2,000 down to 250. And it was basically the first 250 that were taken, season's over.
Right.
And they'll do that with registration hunts too.
Mm-hmm.
If they're, like you said, I mean, it's pretty much an unlimited amount of registration tags you can get,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a maximum number they'll allow you to take out of that herd.
Right.
So they might hand out 4,000 registration tags, but as
Right.
soon as, let's just say, random number 2,500 are killed,
Mm-hmm.
now the hunt's closed.
Right.
It is your responsibility as the hunter to keep up to date with that information.
Right.
Sometimes it's a little bit hard to do, like in that case with the Nilchina herd. I mean, you had 2,000 people with tags
Mm-hmm.
trying to be
Right.
the first 250 to kill something.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody fully expected that hunt to be over in one weekend.
Yeah.
And there was a big controversy over whether they would shut the hunt down mid-weekend. If everybody went out on Friday night
yeah.
and Saturday morning and that 250 was made and reported,
Mm-hmm.
would they shut it down Saturday afternoon, and then all these guys that are out in the field that don't have internet, don't have cell phone
Mhm.
service, or
That aren't
anything
going
like
to come back in till Sunday night.
aren't planning on coming back in from their camp until Sunday night, or maybe they took some time off on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to know? In some of those instances, the state will come out and say, for the first weekend, we're not going to shut it down. We'll do our count after that and then make our decision.
Mm-hmm.
But don't count on that.
Right.
Only rely on that if they specifically have told you that.
Right.
Because otherwise, it is 100% up to you. And in the state of Alaska, ignorance is not an excuse for anything.
Right.
If you're breaking a regulation and you tell the trooper that, oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that,
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't mean you're out of
Yep,
trouble.
yep.
Like
Right.
you should have known you couldn't do
Right.
that.
Right.
And the same goes for harvesting. You might have a legal tag in your pocket, but if
Mhm.
it's become illegal since the time you drove out on your wheeler,
Yeah.
That's your responsibility to know.
Didn't the 40-mile hotline for the 40-mile caribou herd have a phone number that you could text on your inReach and then get an update from the field?
They did. Yes. And
I think that was
if
true.
that's still a thing, we
Yeah.
might be able to
I'll look into that.
Until-
I haven't heard
yeah.
about that, but
I believe you're right. I think there
I
was
thought-
something about that.
Yeah, I thought that the last time I hunted that hunt, which would have been 3 or 4 years ago now,
Mhm.
in August, they had a way to communicate to you via your Garmin inReach,
Right.
or for that matter, whatever satellite communication device that you had. That
Mhm.
way, you could get field updates out of cell coverage
Right. Yeah.
while you were in the field to say, "Hey, I have caribou here. Can I shoot them?" Basically,
Mhm.
because for instance, if you go out opening weekend, or say it's 3 weeks into season,
Yeah.
and the herd is only 150 animals away from meeting their quota, well, everybody and their brother is out on that weekend, and you're planning to be out there from Thursday till Tuesday.
And that herd is one road crossing away from meeting that quota.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. It's one. How do I say this tactfully? It's one massacre.
Vietnam.
Yeah, it's one massacre away from meeting that quota.
Mhm.
Well, you're planning to be out there for 4 or 5 days. That
Yeah.
could easily happen in the amount of time that you're out there.
Right.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
hunt closes Sunday night. via emergency order on the hotline,
Mhm.
and you're planning to hunt till Tuesday. Well, how do you know? You are responsible to know.
Yeah.
You have to know.
Solely responsible.
So
Mhm.
usually what I would do in that situation, I would just text somebody on my inReach back in town,
Right.
have them call the hotline, and then text me an update. Hey, they are letting, there are 50 animals left. So
Mhm.
you're still in the clear. And as long as the hotline says it's still open,
Yeah.
you're still good to go.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you'll notice when the updates start getting more frequent. Sometimes you'll call into that hotline, which if you go and you do a really simple Google search, just search ADF&G, whatever the registration hunt you're hunting, or really any hunt, and with the word hotline after it,
Mhm.
you'll find that number. It'll take you to the page on Alaska Fish and Game's website.
Mhm.
And you'll be able to find that number and stay up to date. And like you said, contacting somebody back in town is a great way of doing that.
Mhm. Yeah.
But you'll notice, like at the very beginning of the hunt, especially if they have a high number quota,
Yeah.
like 2,000 or something like that, they might not update it for a week,
Yeah.
maybe a week and a half.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sometimes, heck, even more than that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
If the numbers aren't rolling in. I mean,
Mhm.
we saw it early last year with the 40-mile herd. I mean, nobody was getting caribou
Mm.
in the early season
Yeah.
because they migrated weird.
Okay.
And so they weren't where everybody thought they were going to be, and then they had to go find them basically.
Yeah.
And so you didn't have that opening day slaughter,
Right.
that
Right.
everybody kind of expects
Right.
out of that particular herd. But then you'll see as the numbers start to grow, as they're doing their counts, as reports are coming in, you'll start seeing updates every 3 days
Mhm.
and every 2 days.
Mhm.
And then that, you really got to be checking these things. Don't, just because you checked it 2 days ago doesn't mean, you're good to roll out for the weekend.
Right.
Like
right.
as you're rolling out of town, call that number.
Mhm.
Like listen, it's just a recording.
Yeah.
You're going to listen to
Yep.
maybe a 2-minute recording at most. They'll go
Mhm.
over the different areas, the different numbers, and they'll give you any updates. Some things with the caribou numbers,
Mhm.
the limits on these hunts will be specific to bull or cow.
Mhm.
In the instance of last year, they were allowing a certain number of any caribou. And then once a certain number of cows were shot, then it went to any bull.
Mhm.
And so be sure you're checking on that too. Because, yeah, the hunt might still be open, but the regs might have changed as far as what you're allowed to shoot.
Mhm.
So it's really, really important, especially if you're coming up as a non-resident DIY hunter,
Mhm.
to be
Yeah.
educated
Yeah.
on the ever-changing regulations that come
Right.
through.
Right.
And just making sure you are hunting in accordance with the law,
Mhm.
because Alaska doesn't play.
Yeah.
When you violate the regs, I mean, it gets bad quick.
Mhm.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nobody to blame but you.
Yep. So before we dive too much into hunting styles, I wanted to just say, and this might make me some friends, this might make me some enemies, but caribou hunting in this state tends to bring out the worst in people.
Mm.
It really, really does.
In certain areas.
In certain areas, yes. In certain easy to access areas.
Yes.
And I just need to encourage people to not lose your sense conservation, your sense of
Ethics.
your sense of just being like a normal person, I would think.
Right.
But, you go on some of these trails or roads.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just see ash
Mhm.
everywhere.
Yep.
And it might be perfectly pristine and clean before season opens.
Yep.
Soon as opening day comes around, you roll down there, there's toilet paper
Mhm.
everywhere. There's
Mhm.
camp trash everywhere.
Yep.
Cans everywhere. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just like the whole concept of leave no trace just goes completely out the window as soon as caribou season opens.
Right.
And it's absolutely abysmal. It is horrible. And it just I don't know. I love caribou hunting.
Mhm.
That's the group I don't like being associated with though.
Right.
And it's not that hard.
Mhm.
trash bags don't cost very much.
Right.
It's not that hard to pull it out because I've pulled a lot of other people's trash out of the trails.
So
Go for it.
just for a second here. We have a lot of folks that aren't from Alaska and a lot of folks that are from Alaska that listen to the show that don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
So allow me to attempt to flesh this out here.
Okay.
So
Sorry if I ranted a little bit.
No. And everything James just said is exactly right. But I don't want folks to think that any caribou hunting area gets trashed.
That
like
is
this.
true. That is true.
So this applies specifically to the 40-mile caribou herd.
Yeah.
Which mainly, the vast majority of hunting for that herd takes place via the access of two roads. Taylor Highway out by Tok, which is out towards the Canadian border, and then also out the Stees Highway, which is accessed out of Fairbanks.
And just to clarify, we're not spot burning anybody because that's widely known public information.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
This is just how folks access these regions where the caribou come through.
Is there more people that hunt the Stees? Probably.
By far.
I would say so. There's
by
a lot
far.
more,
I think so.
a lot more access.
Now, the Stees Highway is only like an hour and a half to 2 hour drive out of our town to access. Therefore, we get a lot of just run out for an evening, go hunt, kill a caribou, run back into town, even that same night. And I've done that before.
Yeah, same here.
What happens is, because people know that the caribou are going to be near the road most of the time, they all go out there the day before opener, and they sleep in their trucks or they pitch a camp literally on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I've seen tents pitched, without exaggeration, on the drivable surface.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A few years ago, I drove past somebody, and this was 4 or 5 years ago, and I've heard about it happening since then. There was a minivan parked in my lane of traffic, headed out there with a great vantage point from the road, stopped in that lane of traffic, not even beginning to pull into the ditch. And they had the back hatch of the minivan open and a whole canvas overhang tent right there on the road.
Yeah.
It necked the traffic down to one lane right there. And there was a guardrail and a 100-foot drop off on one side.
I actually think I remember that. I think I drove past that.
That kind of stuff happens all the time up there.
Yeah.
So that area gets a flood of people on opening weekend. Okay. You have hundreds and hundreds. It turns into a city.
Yeah.
Every pullout, and this is, and for folks that can't imagine this, every pullout has at minimum 100 or more trucks in it.
Yeah.
And that is no exaggeration. It is a city. There are four-wheelers going in every direction, people getting out and guns waving everywhere and shots going off all around you. It is a war zone.
Yeah.
People go to the hospital every single year from negligent firearm use. And they shoot over a horizon, miss a caribou, or shoot through one and shoot somebody else beyond it.
Yeah.
I know somebody that works at our local Fairbanks hospital, and last year she said, after I got home from being gone most of the fall, thankfully I've missed out on that hunt for a few years now. But she said that last fall on opening weekend, she had 6 or 7 people come in with gunshot wounds from that hunt. None of them were fatal, thankfully.
Right.
But nonetheless, it's downright dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, so safety is just thrown out the window.
Yeah.
And it also becomes pretty difficult to even be safe with that many people around you. You have to make sure that there is a hard stop hillside background behind that animal before you pull the trigger.
Right.
So not only do you have all those people up there, safety goes out the window. A lot of these guys, and do not take this the wrong way, a lot of these guys are just uneducated.
Yeah.
And now if you jump on like the 40-mile caribou hunting Facebook page, a lot of the locals blame the military residents that come up here because, well, they don't know any better and they just think it's just like everybody goes deer hunting on opening day in Michigan and blah, blah. It's not all the military guys' fault.
No.
And then you have guys that just bring up whatever firearm they own. And this is a real life story here. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. This actually happens. I watched a guy get out of his truck, I had shot a caribou a couple of miles off the road. I had ridden down to it. I'd shot it. I was quartering it out. One of my good hunting buddies was with me. This is the last time I ever did that hunt, and this was a number of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked up on the road because my buddy said, hey, there's somebody walking up there and they've got a gun. I pulled out my binoculars. I reached up there and I watched him. He had an AR with no scope on it. And this big old magazine hanging out the bottom of it. It was at minimum a 30-round mag, probably more than that. And there were 2 cow caribou that came running underneath of him with me on the other side of them. Down the hill, 1.5 miles to 2 miles, but still right below those caribou. And all I can hear is the crack of the rifle going and going and going and going. And those caribou were at minimum 400 yards away from this guy.
Yeah.
Open sights, AR rifle, whether it was 5.56 or 308 or 7.62, whatever it was. He was just dumping rounds at these caribou, hoping to hit one of them.
Yeah.
He shot one of them in the back leg, in the knee joint. Its leg was just dangling and spinning as it was trying to run away. And then he shot and killed the other one. This particular year, you could shoot 1 caribou. And he hit the other one, and it ran off. And I watched it bed down, and it died there later on that day.
Yeah.
When I was on my way out, I drove past it to go look, and it was laying there dead.
Yeah.
So he irresponsibly harvested more than he was legally allowed to do. He put me at danger by shooting in my direction. And that was not even close to the boundaries of ethics.
Yeah.
And I think what happens with that crowd mentality, everybody feels like, well, I better just jump out and shoot one as soon as I can because I don't know if I'm going to get another one.
Right.
Right. And then along with that, like James was saying, the trash. People just think, well, everybody else is out here. Somebody else will grab it.
Yeah.
I'm in a hurry. I just killed a caribou. The bugs are terrible. I'm cold. It's raining. Throw it in the bed of the truck and let's go.
Yeah.
And guys just leave. And they leave a campfire pit full of beer cans, and they leave Mountain House wrappers, trash, and I mean, just all the garbage you can think of. I've seen guys drive off and leave their tents on the side of the hillsides out there. It is next level ridiculousness. Now, that doesn't happen as much on the Taylor Highway because it's a lot farther away to get to.
It's a lot more work.
And generally speaking, the folks that put in the effort to go out there are a little bit more responsible.
I will say last year, because of the influx of people that went out, because that's where the caribou were hanging out earlier in the season.
Okay.
They didn't migrate up to the Steese as early as everybody thought they would.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot about the Taylor Highway getting the exact same way.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Man,
so it's
that's too bad.
that group.
Right.
You know, that like you said, that crowd mentality.
I've actually never done that hunt on the Steese in the summer.
Yeah.
I've done the winter hunt on the Steese,
Right.
which there's usually less guys. There's still a lot.
Always.
But in the winter, I've been, I was with a buddy and he shot a caribou, and I started cutting up his caribou while he went to the truck to get the packs. And I was getting shot at by guys who thought that dead caribou, I was behind it, so they didn't see me, but it was a dead caribou. But they're just slinging lead, and they're 600 yards away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then
Shooting at you.
Yeah, and you jump up and wave your arms, and they stop.
Right. Yeah.
But then, and then next thing you know, a bunch of caribou come running up out of a draw, and they're just slinging lead at them.
Yeah.
Just slinging lead.
Irresponsibly.
They have no idea.
unethically.
They're not aiming. Briefly. Now, those caribou came by me, ran by me. I calculated distance. I took one shot and I dropped a caribou.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which felt really good when you've got a bunch of guys slinging lead and they can't hit nothing. And then you drop one. Right. But,
Right. But just for the point, though, I don't want folks to think that this happens in every caribou hunt.
And
This is mainly the 40-mile caribou hunt.
Right. And I do apologize if I seem to have attacked all caribou hunters. That was not my intention.
Right.
But specifically, yes, you're correct.
This is
with
just
this hunt.
very poignant for us.
It's a hunt that happens close to our hometown, so
Yes.
it's one we're very familiar with.
Yes.
And it's one that I personally have heard 2 shots whiz by my head, while being out there gutting out a caribou.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about hearing the bang. I heard the zzz, the actual round.
Yeah.
And I've seen that exact same thing where the caribou, because we'll get into this a little bit later about caribou behaviors, but they tend to run in circles when they don't know where to go.
Mhm.
They'll go up over a hill and then they'll come right back over that same hillside, and then they just kind of run around and they're just kind of
Disoriented.
figuring out. Yeah, they're disoriented. They're trying to figure out where to go.
Right.
And especially when there's that many people, they just, oftentimes you'll have more than one chance at the same group.
Right.
But it's like nobody knows that.
Right.
It's like nobody.
Right.
And so there's this amazing, like you said, we have to shoot now. We have to
Right.
shoot now.
Mhm.
And,
Right.
and the whole concept of knowing what your target is and what's beyond it
Yeah.
out of the picture. Like,
Yeah.
nobody thinks
Doesn't
they
about
even
start
matter.
pulling the trigger.
that.
Yeah.
And even just other basics that you would normally walk through 10 times before you ever pull the trigger, right?
Yep.
Going through your basics, going through your ballistics, knowing where your bullet's going to land.
Yep.
Several years ago, my wife and I were up there, and we were going in, getting ready to hike in on this band that we had seen bedded down on a hillside
Mhm.
far off the road.
Yeah.
And I'd ranged them at 1,600 yards off the roadside.
Oh man.
So we were gearing up. We're getting ready. We're going to hike across this flats. We're going to go over there.
Mm-hmm.
And people saw us pulled off on the side of the road and pulled up behind us and started freehand shooting at those caribou. Freehand shooting.
Wow.
So my only word is, if you're going on that hunt, remember your ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Remember your decency.
Right.
Be the outdoorsman that you should be.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
because there's a ton of people out there, that's no excuse to let those morals slide.
Right.
That's no excuse to just throw it to the wind and be like, somebody else's problem.
It's
Right.
it's hunters
it's-
like we've described that are going to get a hunt like that, or many hunts in Alaska shut down,
Right.
because
Yes.
all it takes is that example and the wrong people getting a hold of it,
Yeah.
and putting it out there, just like the predator management article.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Huge thing all over the states now. People are predator control in Alaska,
Yeah.
right?
All it's going to take is one military guy to get shot out there,
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
and the military gets a hold of it,
Yep.
and then it makes a paper, and then it makes the national news.
You're right.
And now all of a sudden we have the press knocking on the door of,
Yeah.
hey, why is this hunt not safer? Why don't they make people wear orange?
Yeah. And I will say this from a lot of military guys that I know personally that go out there and hunt that.
Mm-hmm.
They do tend to be safety minded as far as firearm safety. It's kind of drilled into you in the military. Firearm safety is a very big thing. Now, I'm not saying there's not particular ones that go out there and
Right.
just act a fool because
Right.
they think they can. But I'm just going to say from my own anecdotal experience,
Mm-hmm.
I've not noticed that. And so it does. I don't like pointing the finger at any one specific demographic
Right.
of individual
Exactly.
or background.
Exactly.
I don't think that the fact that the military goes
Oh,
out
it's all
there
the
and
Anchorage
hunts is right. Yeah.
Right.
I don't think that's it. I think it's
No.
just whatever happens when that many people get in one group.
It becomes mob mentality.
Right. Mob mentality, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And you
Yeah.
gotta really fight to resist that.
This isn't a deer drive, right?
It kind of turns into one.
It kind of turns into it, but
honestly.
that's not
Now,
what it is.
But
now, I was just going to say, to that point, just here a couple of days ago, at the time of this recording, I saw something where there is a hunter's education for Alaska hunting for military members in Fort Wainwright and Eielson for our
Mhm.
local area to attend a hunter's ed meeting
Mm.
specifically addressing the 40-mile caribou hunt and
Yeah.
safety and ethics of it.
Yeah.
That is a step in the right direction
Yeah.
for all
It
those
is.
guys, and most of those guys are on a 3-year cycle.
Mhm.
They come up here. If this is their first year, most of the time as a non-resident, you have to wait a year as a new resident to the state to get your residency approved
Right.
to
yeah.
then get tags over the counter like we do, like this one,
Mhm.
even for registration permit. However, they make an exception for caribou hunting. You only have to be in for a lot shorter time, and you can get signed off
Mhm.
that as long as you can prove that you are living locally here, then you can get a caribou permit well ahead of that year's mark. So you've got a lot of guys every year that are brand new to Alaska.
Right.
They really want to get out there and go hunting and get their feet wet, but they don't know anything about it. They don't know what kind of terrain they're getting in. They don't understand how the animal's dynamics works. They don't understand how to judge bull versus cow. They see antlers. Well, they're used to deer species in the lower 48.
Mm.
Does don't have antlers in the lower 48, right?
Yeah.
So a caribou completely throws them for a loop.
Mhm.
How are they supposed to know if they don't read the regs, right?
We're going to talk about it.
Exactly. and anyway, but yeah, just not. This is not a rant at any one particular group. I just
Right.
think that when you get that many people with that many animals, people just feel like, oh, I have to shoot one right now, you know, or else they're going to be gone, and then I'm going to lose my shot.
Yeah.
And it's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that.
And the other thing, before we move on, I want to say is we're not trying to discourage people from going on that hunt either.
No.
We're not trying to say it's a bad hunt to go on. You know, we're not trying to say, you know, stay away from this area. It's,
Right.
you know.
Because all of us have taken advantage of that.
Right. It's a very good opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take anything away from this rant,
Yeah.
just, you know, be courteous, keep your ethics in mind, and, you know, be part of that group that kind of holds that value system in place.
Right.
You know, when you start seeing trash laying around, pick it up.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, even if it's not yours, pick
Yep.
it up.
Absolutely.
And keep that area clean. Keep the, you know, if you see people beyond where the caribou are at, guess what? That's an unsafe shooting situation. You know, keep firearm safety in mind. Be that difference. If you see somebody being unsafe, say something.
Yeah.
You know, don't just stand there and watch as they're firing in the direction of other people. You know, make sure they're aware that there's people down there.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm not pointing fingers saying everybody out there that's doing this stuff is even a bad person.
No.
I think they just get in this crazed mindset.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so to go on this hunt, take advantage of the opportunity, but try to keep it within the bounds of
Mhm.
of an ethical hunt.
Yeah.
And that's where I'll leave that.
Yeah. Now, I would say something else too, as far as your own personal safety. Bring an orange vest.
Yeah. On
Where-
that one, yeah.
Wear an orange hunter's hat.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you shoot a caribou, what I usually do, if I'm in an area that has a lot of guys or happens to have a lot of guys in years past, I'll take off my orange vest and put it on the antlers.
Mm-hmm.
So that the guys, if they don't practice safety and the first thing they look at that caribou through is their rifle scope,
Yeah.
which often happens,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing they notice is, that's got an orange vest on his head and there's a dude standing there.
Yeah.
You know, make it obvious that the caribou's dead. He's got an
Yeah.
orange vest on his head. And then, there's a guy wearing an orange hat.
Yeah.
Right. So just take some proactive measures for safety as well.
Yeah. And for the record, I have seen people out there doing safety checks on people. I mean, I've seen guys that are going in straight drill sergeant ballistic mode when people are being unsafe.
I've informed a few guys of their safety practices.
And to those of you out there doing that, I applaud you.
Yeah.
And we need more like you out there.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
But on the topic of being ethical on these hunts, when you know the regs, when you know what you're allowed to shoot,
Yeah.
whether it's bull or cow, specifically, we'll just stick with caribou.
Mhm.
How do you tell the difference? Like you said, a lot of guys, especially if they're from the lower 48, coming up here for a DIY hunt, you're responsible for knowing that. You know, caribou is not one you necessarily need a guide for. A lot of people do come up and use a guide for it, but you don't need to. So when you're out there with just you and let's say your brother or your buddy, you got to be able to tell the difference.
Yep. Absolutely.
And there's a couple of key ways to do that. One, if you're in a really good area, which most people, I think, coming up here for like a dedicated DIY hunt know where they're headed. They know what they're going to these areas that are a little harder to get to. I think they're kind of doing that more wilderness hunt.
A lot of them are flying out.
Flying out.
Which is awesome.
It is, yeah. You'll be able to, in a really good area, a good herd with good genetics and good health, you'll notice a pretty stark difference between the antlers of bulls and cows.
Yes.
I'm not saying use that as a end all be all, but it's a good indicator because cows' antlers can get big, but they look spindly.
Yes.
You know, they look thin. They're not these big giant.
They don't palmate.
They're no palmation at the end.
They don't
no
have
shovels.
Shovels, right. Right.
And they just don't get that density. You know, I mean, you look at a bull caribou's antlers, a big, nice, mature bull, not a yearling, not a 2-year-old, but like a mature bull.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're just
Baseball bat.
dense. Yeah, they're baseball bats. A cow's antlers are never going to quite reach that.
Right.
They're going to look more like a, I don't know, like a leafless bush almost.
Right.
Like they're,
there you go.
just like twigs,
Yeah.
sticking up off the
A
top of
couple
his
of
head.
dead sticks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
dead sticks. Yeah.
Yes. Especially after they shed their velvet. I mean, they are really, really spindly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice pair of salad tongs.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, not to say they're not gonna, fan out a little bit, but I mean, you're gonna notice the difference. If you go on Google and you just look at pictures of caribou, you'll notice exactly what we're talking about.
Mhm.
They just look more fragile.
And as far as size goes, I mean, a fully mature cow's antlers are only going to get up to what, maybe 20 inches?
So,
Like-
yeah, probably.
Probably between 16 and 20 inches or
Right,
so.
yeah.
Where and again, no bezzes. Well, yeah, kind of, but no shovels,
Mhm.
no palmation. That they don't kind of curve up at the top as they grow.
Right.
They don't have back scratchers on them.
Mhm.
There are just distinguishing characteristics. And for a trophy hunt, you're not even going to be looking at that size of antlers anyway. So it doesn't matter if a caribou has big antlers.
Mhm.
It's a bull.
Right.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah, yeah. You can know the difference pretty easily just by that alone. But there are other distinguishing factors.
Yes.
One is obviously if you're close enough to shoot and you have good optics,
Mm-hmm.
you can probably notice the reproductive organs
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
animal.
Yeah.
If it's a good mature bull and you're looking at it from the broadside, you'll see it hanging.
Yep.
And if it's a cow, you won't.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so there is that. And then the other thing is if it's walking away from you,
Mm-hmm.
the rump patch
Yes.
on females tends to be a lot wider.
Yes.
The rump patch on a male is going to be a lot more just towards the inner part of the legs, kind of
Mhm.
going up right below the tail.
Mhm.
Not quite as
Yep.
wide.
Yep. Females' white patches kind of extends over about halfway out on their hips.
Right.
And it's almost like a little heart shape, but it covers more square inches of their posterior than the bulls do. There's just more white there on the females.
Yeah. So once you, and again, we've talked about this, and I believe it was the How to Hunt Alaska series we did
I think so.
a while
yeah.
back now.
Yep.
And we touched on it then too, but the most important thing you can do when you're trying to learn the legality of animals
Mhm.
and differentiating between male and female and things like that is just familiarization.
Mhm.
Look
Yes.
at pictures.
YouTube
Google,
videos.
Yeah, YouTube videos, Google images. It's all a great resource. I mean, with the internet, you have basically unlimited images that you can test yourself. You can have your buddies download a bunch of pictures where
Mhm.
they know the answers and then, show the pictures to you without the captions of, bull caribou or
Right.
or cow caribou,
Right.
and just make sure 100% that you can tell the difference. Because that is,
Mhm.
again, not something you want to mess up on your hunt.
Exactly.
Right.
That is a big no. So they will throw the book at you if you mess that up. So
yes.
definitely understand the difference there.
Yeah. I think Fish and Game actually has. Well, I know for sure that in the regs they have a couple of little illustration photos,
yep.
kind of
Mhm.
distinguishing those characteristics that we spoke to. I thought at one point they had a little YouTube video, a bull or cow caribou. I don't see it on YouTube right now. Just kind of looking here. They have one that's listed as virtual presentation, Caribou Across the Last Frontier, and that was posted 2 years ago. I don't know if that has the information in there. They also have Alaskans Afield, Big Game Hunting for New Hunters. That's also a Fish and Game YouTube. It's like Big Game Hunting 101. And it's like an hour-long presentation video. Stuff like that is going to be really informative. That comes right from the horse's mouth. That is Fish and Game themselves.
Yep.
And then also, like I said, in the regs, it has bull versus cow characteristics.
Mhm.
Describes all the things that we just talked about. That's probably where I would say to start,
Yeah.
and then go watch some YouTube videos and look at a bunch of caribou trophy photos and look at those distinguishing characteristics.
So
Right.
if you go to Alaska Department of Fish and Game website and you go to the caribou section, there's like a big game species, and you just click on caribou, and you go to more resources. There's a bull or cow link, and that is a nice PDF of several pages that goes through. It's got lots of pictures, and it's got arrows saying this is a bull, this is a cow. These are the things you can see.
Nice.
On each of them.
And the biggest time frame that it's hard to distinguish is those young bulls.
Yes.
Young bulls can look like cows in many cases. Now, again, if you're coming up and you're doing a float in somewhere or a fly in somewhere, or somewhere where you're getting a little bit more remote and they have really good genetics in the herd and they've had a chance to grow, you're gonna find good big mature bulls. You're gonna find what you're after. Where a lot of people struggle is like with the 40-mile herd. Because so many people hunt it. And due to other factors as well, there's just not the genetics for like those massive bulls. You can get them every once in a while. I've seen some pretty good looking bulls come out of that herd, but just typically speaking, I would say a lot of them don't tend to be those big, kingly looking, caribou.
Right.
And when you get into those like 2-year-old bulls, they don't have those big antlers yet. And so if you're in an area where it's a bull only, and you're in a herd like that, like the 40-mile, where they just sometimes don't get that big, you really got to pay attention to those other factors that we talked about with the reproductive systems and the rump patches and things like that. Really pay attention. If that's the only bull you've seen that day, or that's the one you're choosing to go home with, verify.
Yeah.
We've talked about this several times on the show, but you are the only person responsible when you are the one pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what your buddy said.
Yeah.
Your buddy sitting right next to you can be like, no, it's a bull. Trust me. It's a bull. Trust me.
No.
If it's not, he's not the one getting in trouble.
If you don't know for yourself, then you shouldn't be shooting it.
Exactly.
Period. End of story.
Yeah.
Something else I would say too is body size. Those 2 or 3-year-old bulls haven't gotten as big of a body that they've grown into like the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old bulls will. A monster caribou bull can weigh up to 500 pounds. That's a really big caribou.
Yeah.
But the cows don't weigh, usually less than half that usually. But those young bulls are going to be a lot closer to cow-sized bodies as well, which makes it difficult.
Yeah.
A big bull is going to look massive next to even a full-grown mature cow.
Right.
But if you have small bulls mixed in with average adult cows, just off body size and antler size, you're not going to be able to tell much of a difference.
Exactly.
And caribou move. They're constantly moving. They hardly ever stand still.
Yeah.
Which makes it exciting, and it's always different, and there's always that element of a moving target sometimes, unless you catch them bedded, which is a really good way to hunt them like that. Find them when they're bedded and then make a move on them.
Yep.
But when they're kind of intermingling in a herd group like that, and sometimes you'll find a group of 10, sometimes you'll find a group of 300 together. And it's awesome to see that many animals. It really is something special to see that many animals all together at the same time.
Yeah.
We don't see that many moose hanging out together. We don't see sheep in that number. We don't hunt bears in that number. It's really the only animal like it that's that many animals in a herd group like that.
Right.
It's really something it's neat to experience that. But if there isn't a distinguishably big bull in that group that's body size is bigger and he has big antlers and it's just easy, obviously that's a bull, then that can make your job a little bit more difficult. Now, a lot of times too, just for folks that might not know, with caribou, those big bulls, say you have a migration herd and the herd is stretched out over 100 miles. The first group of caribou, the first 75% of that herd that comes through is all going to be medium bulls, some good ones sprinkled in there, but all the big guys are in the back of the line.
Yeah.
Because they want all the cows and the young guys to have to get whacked by wolves and bears first.
Right.
And the big guys stay in the back of the line. So as the herd progresses through, if you've got a big group that's kind of funneling past you in a valley and you're looking for a especially big bull, wait till the end.
Yep.
You might really regret it if you pop one halfway through and you just get impatient and you shoot what you think is a nice bull And then just a stud comes by 10 minutes later and you
Yep.
go, oh man, now I'm disappointed. And all I can do is take a picture of that one. And
Yep.
that's kind of a disappointing feeling.
And book another hunt.
Yeah. Or let your friend shoot the big one, which I did the last time I was up there on the 40-mile hunt. I was with Remy and I shot a bull, and then we spotted 2 more that were bedded a long ways away. We made a move on them, sneaked in, and I had already tagged mine, and it was a average, small bull. It was nothing special,
Good meat bull.
not big antlers at all.
Yeah.
But it was only one that we'd had a crack at all day. And so I thought, well, feast or famine, I want to shoot something for meat.
Mm-hmm.
Then we spotted 2 really nice bulls bedded way back in there somewhere. We went over there and stalked into real close, and he shot one with my rifle of all things. And because he had brought his bow, and I said,
okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I said, well, and he put a stalk on him with his bow, and he got into like 70 yards, and they busted him.
Mm.
And he nearly had him with his bow. And then they jumped up. He came running back to me. They circled around, just like you said, came running right back in to look at us, and he shot it with my rifle.
Nice.
So, yeah. Case in point, sometimes patience pays off, especially with caribou. Wait till the back of the line.
I've got a picture here of 3 caribou and Dalton in the background.
Mm.
Okay. We were talking about this hunt before we started this podcast. We started recording, but there's 2 cows and a bull in this picture laying dead on the ground. Remember that?
Yep.
And there's no way from the picture you can tell which is which.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
The bull is slightly bigger and has slightly bigger antlers. But I'm going to post this on Instagram, and so it'll be a week old when this podcast comes out. But it's an example. When they're laying down on the ground, unless they've got a real big set of antlers, there's almost no way to tell.
Unless they're that really trophy-sized, mature bull.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and,
which is what most people, I think, are chasing when they come up here after a caribou. I mean, nobody wants to come up here and shoot a spindly little 2-year-old.
Right. If you Google caribou.
Can I see that picture really quick?
If you Google caribou, it looks like pretty much all bulls is about what comes up for the most part. There's a few. Oh, there's a moose. Huh. There's a few cows, obviously, or ones that could be small bulls, but for the most part, it's just bigger bulls.
Right.
Did I shoot the bull on that trip?
No, I did.
You did.
Yeah.
That's the one in the foreground there.
The front one is the bull.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
you shot the one in the back. Yeah. Well, you shot the one in the back closest to you.
I did.
It had that weird growth on it.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if you look at this picture, folks, you'll see this like 8-inch growth hanging off the rear end of the one that Dalton shot.
Yes. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
It was like a big tumor, and it was a hard sac that had grown off one of the hindquarters. It was about the size of a watermelon.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Look like maybe from fighting or something? Or
I cut it open, and that one was an any caribou tag, and this was in the middle of winter.
It was like the coal hunt or something. I think it was. That's when you had to turn in the bottom part of the jaw.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That was the year that they were trying to take out a bunch of animals from the herd, and they opened the winter hunt. I hadn't hunted it in the fall, or maybe I had, and they said that you could shoot 2 in the winter if you hadn't killed one in the fall.
Right.
But you could shoot 1 in the winter if you'd already killed one in the fall. So I could only shoot 1.
Mm-hmm.
But I shot that cow because, case in point, it was February or January when we shot those.
I don't even remember. Let me look at the picture.
It was definitely after New Year's at some point.
Right.
It was either January or February. But in that group that we came on to, it was my brother and I and Mariah.
Mm-hmm.
And by that point, all of the big bulls had shed their antlers long since. So the only ones that had antlers still were the cows, and then a couple of real small bulls, like the one that Mariah shot, that for some reason hadn't dropped his headgear yet. And those antlers weren't much bigger than a cow's antlers. Yeah. But again, sex didn't matter because it was an any caribou hunt, right? But I shot a cow, and we went up to it, and it had like a big watermelon-sized growth on its back leg. After we field dressed it, I cut it off, and it wasn't attached to the meat. It was just attached
just hanging off the hide.
Yeah, it was just a growth on the hide.
Interesting.
And I cut it off, and then I cut it open after I was done cutting on the meat, so that my knife wasn't tainted at that point in case it was nasty. And it was like a white, it looked like a huge gland almost.
Oh,
It
Like
was
weird.
It was
really
almost like a really
strange.
hard fat.
Yeah.
So-
yeah. It was white and it looked kind of fatty. Yeah, it was. I've never seen anything like it before.
Didn't have like
So-
a real pale yellowish color to
I
it.
know that sometimes
Kind of.
I know sometimes they have the issues with those burrowing.
It could have been an infection like
could
that.
be an infection
but
from that or something like
yeah,
that.
I'm not sure what happened. But
Yeah.
Well, and the whole outside of it was covered in hair, like
yeah.
the rest
Oh
of
yeah.
Caribou.
Yeah.
It was grown over.
Yeah.
But I talked to somebody about it and they said it was some kind of a tumor or something like that, and that as long as the meat didn't smell funny or have any weird colors in it, which
Right.
it didn't, we ate it, no problem. Haven't never
Nice.
got sick from it, no problem. We've long since finished eating that caribou.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot all about that until I just saw that picture.
Yep. And for those of you wondering what Dalton was talking about, since the males and females both have headgear, if you are adventurous enough to go out on a winter hunt for these things, which
Mhm.
it's really cold, but
Oh, yeah.
but they're still out there
What
moving
was it, like
around.
20 below on that hunt, something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it warmed up during the day, but it was cold
Yeah.
when we went out.
But later in the year, like that, after the New Year's, most of the bulls will have dropped their headgear already,
Mhm.
and the cows retain them longer. And there's a couple different theories for that. One is to fend off predators
Mhm.
because they're pregnant at that point, and
Right.
that makes the bulls an easier target than the pregnant cows. But the other is to dig up food,
Mhm.
for them to be able to kind of use those to
Dig through the snow and the ice.
and break up
Right.
the ice and things like that to
Right.
get to food easier to keep themselves nourished
Correct.
through that pregnancy.
Right.
So if you are finding yourself on a caribou hunt in February, late January, something like that, and all you're seeing is little antlers running around, the ones without headgear are the bulls.
Mhm.
At that point in the winter, the cows won't drop them until closer towards spring.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
once basically breakup's right around the corner.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
Well, let's take a quick break one more time, and then we'll jump into hunting tactics.
Alrighty.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to STEALTHYHunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA. All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to StealthyHunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
All right, so hunting methods for caribou are going to consist of two types, primarily, depending on which units you're hunting in.
Yeah.
If you are north of the Yukon Bridge and inside that corridor, you're primarily going to be bow hunting. Well, you're only going to be bow hunting there. The reason I say primarily is because if you are in very good shape and very adventurous and you do venture more than 5 miles off the road, then you can use a rifle out there.
Now, how big
I don't
is-
know anybody that does.
Oh, I do.
I know a couple
people
that have tried.
Yeah.
unsuccessfully.
I know quite a few folks that have hacked it, but explain what the corridor is.
So the corridor, once you get up north of the Yukon River Bridge, off the Dalton Highway, there is a corridor off 5 miles either direction of the road. Now, it's not 5 miles total. That's 10 miles total, either direction. So inside that corridor, you are only allowed to use archery, bow and arrow. A big reason for that is it's a very heavily trafficked road. It's also fairly easy access, and they don't want people just running up there with guns, kind of doing what they do, what we just talked about in other areas of the state.
Right.
And so if you are able to get through that, which can be challenging, very challenging, and you're on that other side of the 5 mile corridor, then you are allowed to use rifles. And a lot of guys will get through that to do, well, I guess back in the day, to do sheep hunting and stuff like that in certain parts.
Now that's all closed.
That's all closed. Yeah, I guess that's kind of a non-factor.
Yeah.
But for the Caribou up there, if you're looking at going up there, especially as a non-resident DIY, you're probably just going to be up there bow hunting.
Yes.
And so, but if you're in north or south of the bridge, rifles allowed pert near everywhere.
Yep.
And so there are several different methods that you can do to get close to caribou, to get in on that shot and to figure out where they are and where they're going to be. Because that's the hard part with caribou. As you pointed out, Dalton, earlier in the show, they move.
Yes.
And they don't ever hardly stand still.
No.
Even when they're in one area, they're going to be kind of
milling around
in that area. And they'll go, if they're in this big bowl, they'll go to one side and then they'll go to the other side. And you'll be able to see them the whole time, but they're not hardly ever just standing still unless they're bedding down somewhere.
Just when you think they're going to head your way, go over the mountain.
Right.
Yep. That's a fact.
Now, if you're going out on a wheeler, there's a lot of people that have the tendency and the thought process that they're going to run down the caribou.
Which is illegal.
The way I worded that is illegal. Yes. Okay, you cannot actually run down the caribou. What I was intending to say there is, they're going to find the caribou and then basically position themselves close enough to the caribou with the wheeler.
Right. Just jump off, shut the machine off, and start blasting.
Right. That has the potential to work, but it is very low odds. They're going to hear you coming. You're going to spook them. And the thing is, caribou, like you just pointed out, Mo, they're sporadic.
Yeah.
And they'll go where you can't take a wheeler. I guess another good thing to point out with the regs is to make sure whatever trail you're on, if you are wheeler hunting, that there's sections of state land, and now I believe we were talking all BLM land.
Yes.
You are not allowed to take a motorized vehicle off trail. That's
for the White Mountains.
For the White Mountains Range,
which is off the Stees Highway access point.
You are not allowed to take your wheeler off that designated trail system. You can ride on it, but if the caribou are off to the side, you're not allowed to just run across the tundra.
Even if you shoot one 100 yards off the trail,
right?
You got to pick it up and carry the meat back to the wheeler, turn around, and head back out. You're not allowed to you can't even ride 20 yards off that trail.
Right.
You will get written up. And there will be guys out there in helicopters with a pocket full of tickets with your name on them if you break the law. And they're going to be all too happy to start writing you up.
Yeah. And a lot of that is due to people that have gone out there and done just that, and they tear up the landscape, they tear up the tundra and everything, and they leave huge ruts everywhere.
They're out there in big side-by-sides with 33-inch tires and mud rigs and tearing it up.
Yeah. And so to avoid that, they have since put in rules and laws that says you have to stay on the trail. So one thing that I've found with caribou over my years of watching them is they are sporadic, and there are a lot of areas they'll go, but they are also creatures of habit. Caribou will oftentimes, not in a small region, But when they're moving from one area to another, they will oftentimes use the exact same trail time after time after time. And you can see these trails in the mountainsides, in the hillsides,
Right.
through the valleys. They look like the most beaten down game trails you've ever seen in your life, because they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the best things to do when you're out there, especially if you're wheeling around, or even if you're walking around and you see a band of caribou,
Mm-hmm.
when you see the direction they tend to be heading, and they're not spooked, they're not going to be running just blatantly across the hillside. They're just moving from one area to another.
Right.
Look for those trails.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing I'll tell somebody. Look for those game trails there,
Yeah.
because that's a good indicator of where they're going to funnel. Now, the hard part is sometimes there's 3 of them going up, 3 different trails,
Yeah.
distinct trails going up a hill, and it depends on whether they want to go one side, the other side, right over the top. And that's kind of a game of chance and a game of your educated guessing.
Right.
If you're patient enough, you can probably see which one they're going to take. But a lot of times it's far enough away, you kind of got to make a decision and just try to go.
Yep.
That is a lot better option than trying to get too close on your wheeler and ruin any chance you had of getting a good ethical shot.
Because as soon as you get too close to them, they freak out and they take off running.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no way of knowing how far they're going to go.
Right.
Well, and even if they don't take off running, they're going to start kind of rummaging in circles.
Yeah.
They're not going to be sitting there just grazing anymore. They're not going to be standing and moving, because even when they're eating, they're still walking in most cases.
Yep.
They're just walking a little bit slowly.
Yep.
If you spook them with the sound of that wheeler, they're not going to be doing that.
Mhm.
They're going to be kind of jogging back and forth, even if they don't spook and actually run over the hill.
Yeah.
And the chance of getting not only a good clean shot, but being able to identify which one you want to get a good clean shot on becomes infinitely harder.
Right.
Because now, especially if you're in a unit that has these smaller bulls and you're trying to identify the smaller bull among the cows, and they're all moving in big circles.
Yep.
The second you come off your binos to get on your rifle scope, now you've lost it, and so that can be a really big disservice to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I will say, when it comes to hunting caribou and moving in on them with an ATV or on foot, especially the 40-mile herd, the 40-mile hunt, because that's by far the most popular hunt.
Yeah.
Is, a lot of times you'll find yourself in a position and the caribou are moving towards you because another group of hunters has spooked them that way.
Right.
Which is great. Good for you. But if you jump up and start running, they're going to do the same thing to you.
Right.
And what they're going to do is they're going to start moving away from everybody.
Right.
So the best thing to do in that situation is to lay down, or just make yourself stop moving. Caribou, my experience anyway, is caribou tend to not spook at anything that's not moving.
Yeah.
Now, if you're up on the North Slope, it's a little different, up off the Haul Road, because everything's flat up there.
Right.
So something standing out like a sore thumb, well, unless if you're by a rock, you've got a chance there, but just don't move. And I mean, the same thing works for a lot of game animals.
Yeah.
You just stand perfectly still and it's like you're invisible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is especially if they don't know exactly what you are at that distance. So,
yeah.
One method I've seen people use as far as those trails go is to just camp out on one. If you don't have a wheeler, or you don't have the energy to hike around and look for them. I will say that's kind of a hard sale for me.
Yeah.
Because there is a very good possibility that if you sit on one of those trails and set an ambush for them, that eventually a band of caribou is going to walk by. But that's a big if. There's a lot of country in this in this area, in the entire state. Caribou, they'll move. I mean, 30 miles a day sometimes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so to put yourself in a position, I've seen most people do that when they maybe don't have motorized access and they're going up to, let's just say, we'll just keep using the 40-mile herd as an example.
Okay.
Going up off the Stees, and they just plan on being up there for 3 days or something like that. They'll take out some lawn chairs, or they'll take out some, camp equipment, and they'll literally set up to where they are out on these trails, and they'll just watch them. And they'll wait until a band runs by. And then at that point, they start trying to figure out which one they want to shoot, if they want to shoot any out of that particular band. The problem there is sometimes you only get 5 or 6 that run by. Sometimes you'll get a lot. But I found if you kind of merge the two where you are very mobile, but you're also very aware of the paths that these caribou take,
right,
that gives you your best odds.
Yeah. I would say the problem is if you don't have a wheeler and you're hunting in an area where there is motorized access, where there is motorized access, the problem that you're going to run into is even if you're on an established game trail where you think they're going to come down, and they would if there was nobody else around,
right?
Everybody else is going to be riding past you and all around you,
right? And as Mo said, chasing them around,
right? Your odds get a lot lower because the guys are going to be out there pushing them every which way on their wheelers and essentially just keeping them away from you inadvertently because they're out there hunting them farther away from the road. So the caribou are going to tend to stay farther away from the road as the hunt goes on. So that's it's probably less than a 50% chance, probably even less than 30% that's going to happen.
Right.
Unless you get a significant ways off the road on foot. And
which people do.
I would say my advice would be if you don't have a wheeler, pick a spot where somebody can't ride. Pick a really steep spot. Pick a brushy, treed-in spot that's steep, that nobody's riding in there. And that's where the caribou are going to go when they get pushed.
Right.
It's not rocket science. I'm not giving away hot tips here. This is just using your brain. And I've killed caribou up there in that area doing exactly that.
Right.
Without a four-wheeler.
Yeah.
Just walk into a hard-to-get-to spot where nobody can get a four-wheeler and just wait. And people will push them right to you. Now, with that in mind, like we mentioned earlier, if a group pushes caribou to you, make sure that you're not shooting back in their direction.
That is a big thing.
Again, safety always at the top of the list here.
And again, legally, they shouldn't be chasing the caribou
so
with their wheelers. That is illegal.
It is illegal to herd game with a motorized vehicle or directly pursue fleeing game.
Right.
You can use your machine to reposition for another chance, but you can't directly just run them down or herd them to somebody else with a motorized vehicle.
Yeah, you're not allowed to push them with your wheeler.
Right.
Now, where the sitting and waiting method might work a little better is if you're in, say, a non-motorized area or on a fly-in hunt. You know, a lot of those places, if you've never been to Alaska before, you can get a pretty good vantage point where you'll see a lot of these trails kind of come in and out of a valley and in and out of these hills and mountains. And I mean, it's amazing when you actually learn to recognize what you're looking at. I mean, when I say they're beaten down, I mean, they're highways. And I mean, I've done it where, you know, you get back 10, 15 miles where nobody else is and you can just sit on a saddle where you see these trails coming through. And I've seen more than once. I mean, you just sit there for an hour or two and eventually some caribou are going to come wandering over. Because that's why that trail is so beaten down.
Right.
Is because they just continually use the exact same path. Especially a really good place to utilize that tactic would be if you're archery hunting north of the bridge up there on the slope.
Yeah, I know we've gotten several emails from listeners inquiring directly about hunting up north in the archery zone. It's no big secret. That is a very popular area for guys that just fly into Fairbanks and rent a vehicle or drive up there with a friend or something that they know in town, and then they just go up there and they just bow hunt inside the 5 mile corridor up on the Hall Road or the Dalton Highway. So that particular style of hunting, like you mentioned, is a really good way of incorporating that. Get out into a spot where it looks like the caribou are going to move through, and you just sit and wait. Don't wear. Well, you don't have to use camo, but be conscious of what colors you're going to be wearing as well.
Use natural colors.
Use colors and solids are just fine, but use things that are going to adapt to your surroundings. You know, that stuff is a lot of brown tundra and tussocks. Earlier in the season, it'll be more green, but winter,
and it'll be dark.
Winter comes fast and everything dies quicker up there that far north than it does down here. It turns to brown and red fall colors up there on that open tundra way faster, about a month or more ahead of time up on the slope than it does down here in the interior. So having some browns, and some tan colors and maybe some muskeg green colors are going to be to your advantage. If you're wearing camo, I'm not real big into camo. I don't think you need it. It's not bad. It doesn't hurt anything, I don't think.
Right.
But if you are a camo guy, the Kuiu Velo pattern is the best, hands down, the best tundra camo pattern out there. That stuff looks like it belongs on the tundra. It's tan and brown and a little bit of light brown. It looks like the terrain up here. It's perfect for it.
Yeah.
Any time of year, whether it's early spring before everything greens up and pops into springtime, or after that frost where everything turns red and brown and tan, that is the perfect camo pattern for that. So just, for folks that might be wondering, well, what kind of camo do I bring? If you think you want to wear camo, I would shop that Kuiu Velo pattern. If you want to go with solids, a lot of Stone Glacier solid patterns, all that buckskin tan color is really good up there. Their muskeg brown colors, the grays work real well too. And they've got that fern green looking pattern on color on a few of their pieces. That's all going to work just fine up there. But just using those earth tone solids that are going to match that surrounding. And then just, glass them from the road if you have to. Look at what direction they're going in. Hike out there a ways and then just get into position and wait for them to come by you.
Right.
If you can find a willow bush or something next to a river or a rock outcropping on a hillside, if you have any terrain features available like that, that's going to be your best bet to stay hidden because, like you mentioned, it's flat up there.
Yeah.
Once you get so far north, there is nothing to hide you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're on your hands and knees a lot. It's wet. We mentioned that before. You're probably going to end up wanting to wear knee boots even. It's just all water once you get to a certain point.
Knee boots and rain gear usually.
Yeah. And having pants that are, even if not rain pants, some kind of a hybridized waterproof pant with a knee pad built into it is going to be to your advantage.
I will
because
say
you want to be low to the ground as much as possible.
The further north you get, especially once you get through the pass, the darker colors. I think the tan would probably almost be too light. You would stand out a lot with that. Even the gray, Stone Glacier gray is pretty bright, pretty light for up there. It'd probably be better than the tan because it's not as light. But I honestly, what I found work really good, kind of in a lot of Alaska, is what some of my favorite camos. Although I don't typically use camo on most of my hunts, but is the dark waterfowl patterns, the woodland waterfowl patterns.
Because it matches all that marshy swampland.
Right. It's either it's dark. There's a pattern. There's a little bit of green, a little bit of tan, but it's just dark.
Yeah.
And so it either matches when you're sitting in the woods, that or depending on what kind of look into the area you're hunting and look at pictures of that portion of the road. If there's a specific portion of the road you're looking at, and look at what it's like, because there's alpine areas on the road, and so that's going to be a completely different pattern, and that's where solids are nice because then
right, you can just adapt. Right, yeah, exactly. But something like that where if you're archery hunting, obviously you have to get a lot closer to the animals. It's going to be a lot of that ambush tactic, and you just try to get in front of them and let them come to you. It's going to be a lot harder for you to be the proactive one on the stalk and be moving on them because there is so limited cover out there.
Right.
If you're outside the 5 mile corridor, you can pretty much be somewhat stealthy and get inside 350 and into rifle range pretty easily. It's not that hard.
Right.
They still feel pretty safe out to 350. From my experience hunting the caribou up in that part of the state, even with rifle hunters, it tends to be that once you're inside that 350 to 300 line, they start to get spooky because again, there's no cover, and they know that that once you're inside that line, you're a little bit too close. Yeah, because there's nothing else walking up to them except caribou, and they know you're not a caribou. Unless you happen to get lucky and they get curious and they just stand there for a while, which definitely can happen. But in my experience, once I've gotten inside that 300-yard mark, they kind of spook. And the whole herd just kind of perks up and says, no, that doesn't belong here. And they just take off. And it's just a thundering of clacking hooves and they're gone.
Yeah.
So that's, I would say of all the ambush style hunting, it's most important if you're doing an archery hunt like that.
Right.
You're going to have to get in front of them. Now, if you're bow hunting the 40-mile herd on a fly out hunt, and you have some terrain features to your advantage, you can find them where they'll be moving across a hillside, and there are some spruce trees and some willow brush there. Get into that stuff.
Yeah.
Let them come right up to you. I mean, they will walk right past you and that kind of stuff.
They really will.
That is perfect for bow hunting. But you don't have that up north. I mean, if we did, archery success would be way higher up there.
Yeah.
But if you're bow hunting in other areas, then you can do a lot more of that proactive style spot and stalk and actually move in on them.
Well, and with caribou specifically, because there's typically so many of them, when you get into these bigger herds, or even if it's just a band of, a smaller band of, let's say 30, you got to keep in mind, that's a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
And so color is a big thing. But more than that, what Mo pointed out with movement, I have found to be huge when sneaking up on caribou, and keeping an eye on all of them, not just your target, but
watch out for cows.
Yeah, watch out for cows. Watch out,
bedded between you and the bull.
Yeah, because they're all looking, and all it takes is one of them to stand up and say that's not right,
and
then
take off.
Then they're all leaving,
right? Exactly.
Like what you had said with out in the 40-mile country. I mean, out there in the middle of winter, wearing all black Carhartts, I've gotten within 30 yards of them using the terrain and keeping an eye on their eyes, where they're looking, where they're paying attention, and being careful with my movements.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take much.
Right.
It doesn't take much to spook them. Right. And movement, I would say, is the biggest thing. If you have terrain features, even if it's just low and you're able to crawl, very slowly.
Yep.
They don't tend to care too much about very slow movements. In a lot of cases, they'll just look right over you.
Yep.
But any kind of a rush, if you're trying to book it for that next bush, or you're trying to anything like that, then they will catch that out of the corner of their eye. And one of those, 20, 50, 100 caribou will see it.
Yeah.
So
the primary means of archery hunting on the North Slope specifically. So once you're through the mountains and you're just there's no trees, there's no brush, except for, maybe some on the rivers, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
The primary way to hunt those caribou is to glass, usually from the road, find a group of caribou you want to go after, and you start walking towards them, depending on how far away they are. And then at some point, you determine which direction they've been heading, and you lay down, you crawl over in front of them, wherever you feel, because you got to make the judgment call on the spot, right?
Right.
If it's a real nasty day, you can get a lot closer to them, right? Because they can't see as far, because and you can't see as far. You're also not going to be able to spot them as far away, but won't have to walk as far then when you do spot them, right? But you lay down and you just wait, or you lay down and you crawl towards the group that's really close to the road.
Right.
Right. And you move very slowly. And when I say crawl, I don't mean your hands and knees. I mean, you're on your belly.
Yeah.
And it's miserable, but when you finally do get to sit up and make that shot, which is a split second chance that you have to do it.
Right. Right.
It's very rewarding.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, talking about rifle hunting, I know we don't need to spend too much time on this, but let's just touch on this for a second. This is where we like to nerd out. Yeah. All of us have opinions on this, but for guys that are wondering how much gun does it take to kill a caribou, obviously that there are minimum legal requirements. You have to hunt with at minimum 22 caliber center fire rifle.
Yeah. Yep.
Obviously we don't recommend anything that small.
Right.
Probably something in the small range would be like a 25-06. Some of those quarter bore small guys would be fine for that. A 25-06 would be a great caribou gun, actually.
Oh, sure.
Something like 100
at reasonable ranges.
110 grain bullet inside 200, maybe 250 or so. It would be just fine. But just for size reference, a really big bull, like we said earlier, is going to be about 400 to 500 pounds in that range, and that's a really nice big bodied bull.
Yeah.
And for the record, I've only ever killed one that I think is even in that ballpark. And I've killed some decent bulls that are still not approaching that 500 pound mark.
Yeah.
But the couple that I have, I shot one of them, and then the guy I was with shot another one that was another nice bull. And those were both too big to maneuver by myself. That they were just monster-bodied bulls.
Yeah.
But those, I've killed the majority of mine over the years to date with a 7 Rem mag. It works.
Yeah.
It's flat shooting. It bucks the wind.
Yeah.
A 284 caliber, in my opinion, is probably my favorite. Whether it's a 7 mag or a 280 Ackley or something like even like the new 7 PRC is a really good long one.
Yeah.
28 Nosler, it's faster than what you need, but it's the thing that I like about the 284s for Caribou is you can reach out there a bit farther. And Caribou country, where you're going to be able to rifle hunt, is generally going to be pretty windy type country.
Right.
It's hilly. You've got a lot of variables. The wind is almost always going to be blowing in some capacity. And you need to be able to judge wind.
Yeah.
The problem that guys run into with shooting caribou at long range in particular is if there isn't any foliage around, you have very few ways to judge how fast the wind is blowing at whatever distance the caribou is.
Right.
Because if it's calm where you're at, but 400 yards over to the caribou at the bottom of the valley, there's a nice stiff 10 mile an hour breeze. Well, you're going to have to hold wind or you're going to drift over.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. Try to keep that in mind. Something that I've done before is kind of watch the hair on the caribou, watch their mane, see if that's kind of flickering in the wind one way or another. If there are no bushes around or no leaves on the trees at that point, to be able to tell that.
Yeah.
That's something to keep in mind. And so for that reason, something like a 284 caliber, I already mentioned the ones that I think would be good that are easy to find.
Yeah.
It's going to do better than a slower moving like a 308.
Yeah.
Which is plenty enough gun for caribou, but it's a little more prone to wind drift. It's a
It is.
slower bullet. It's not as efficient going through the air. It's not going to buck the wind as well as something like a 284 caliber will. So that's what I've gone with, and I've shot caribou from inside 100 yards out well past past 500 yards. It was past that quite a ways, but just for not encouraging folks to take farther shots than they should. I'm not going to say exactly how far the other one was, but
Past 500, less than 1,500?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Past 500, inside 1,000, somewhere in there. But and to that point, I think it's a good time to mention, stay within your ethical range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked earlier in the show about ethics and guys just slinging bullets just because, well, it's just a caribou. People look at caribou as if they are just disposable. They'll take longer shots than they normally would because in their mind, well, if I miss or just nick it or something, then there's going to be another one in 5 minutes and I can just shoot another one.
Right.
That shouldn't be the way that it is. And people, for some reason, seem to have this mindset that, well, it's just a caribou. It doesn't matter. And it should not be that way. It's wrong. It's unethical.
Yeah.
And it's not the right thing to do as a sportsman, as a hunter. That's just wrong. You draw blood, that's your animal.
Yeah.
If you release an arrow or touch off a round at an animal, you need to be confident that you're going to kill it.
Yeah.
And if you wound it, it is your job to get it, to kill it.
Yeah.
Follow up with it and finish the job.
Absolutely.
And that goes for archery as well. A lot of guys get up there on the North Slope, they get in a frenzy and they think, well, and I'm just outside my normal practice range. I practice out to, let's just say 70 yards with my compound bow. And this caribou is at 90. I can just hold over his back and shoot him.
Yeah.
And they shoot him and they nick him in the back strap or something, or they gut shoot him because there's terrible wind drift and the wind is howling. And well, the caribou runs off, crosses a river. I can't get to him. I'll just shoot another one.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
And
stay inside your ethical range that you have practiced at. And that goes for bow or gun. But
and yeah, I would say for rifle hunting, the most important thing as far as how much gun it takes is not necessarily the knockdown power. Because caribou aren't terribly hard to kill. They're
Yeah.
they're not the toughest
Mhm.
deer species out there.
No.
But it's whatever you are comfortable and knowledgeable in shooting.
Right.
Right.
That being said, we don't recommend going out there with, a 223.
Right.
Though people have done it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it.
With the right bullet within 50
With
yards.
the right bullet within the right range, it can be done.
Yeah.
But I don't recommend it. And
Yeah.
the reason I say that is because the temptation to push the limitations, especially out there,
Right.
Exactly.
is very strong. You brought up staying within your ethical range.
Mm-hmm.
I will go as far as saying you need to bring a rangefinder when you are hunting
Oh,
caribou in
yes.
these areas.
Yep.
Yes.
When you're up in the caribou areas, it's wide open in most
Mhm.
cases. There may be some brush, there may be some small trees, but for the most part, it's going to be very wide open territory. And what that does is that gives you very few points of reference to judge distance off of. So if you're used to Kentucky windaging things based off of your own personal judgment of distance, I'm here to tell you, I've been judging distance for a long time. And even I get confused up there without a rangefinder.
It's insane.
You can look at a bush that's 1,000 yards away
Mm-hmm.
and think it's 400,
Right.
like because it's the only bush in the
Right.
entire area.
Right.
And so, and that's where it's like to be able to stay within your ethical range, you need to know the range of the
Mhm.
animal you're shooting. As you said with the wind,
Mm-hmm.
shooting a cartridge that will buck the wind because again, wide open country lends itself to windy conditions.
Yeah.
Right.
And knowing when to limit yourself is the
So-
biggest thing.
Let's take this a step further.
Mhm.
Know your range that you've practiced to and that you know you can hit reliably on target.
Yeah.
Have a rangefinder to determine that range.
Mm-hmm.
Also, know at what range your bullet that you are shooting reaches your minimum expansion velocity.
Absolutely.
Every bullet has it.
Yes.
At that range, whatever that is,
Mhm.
1,800 feet per second is a pretty common one.
Yeah.
At 1,800 feet per second, your bullet is not guaranteed to expand and perform properly
Below that. Yeah.
at below that.
Mhm.
So if you hit that range, let's just throw a number out there at 700 yards.
Right.
Most folks can't shoot 700 yards.
Yeah.
I said it. all the wannabe snipers that
Yeah.
post that they're shooting steel at 500, 600, 700, 800 yards.
Mhm.
Most of those guys, even the ones that shoot that at the range, it's in very little wind.
Mhm.
There's very little
Contro-
variables going
controlled
on.
conditions.
It's a very controlled environment.
Shooting off a bench.
Shooting off a bench,
Mhm.
and that's great. And that's great to practice that. And I'm not dogging on that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but that's not hunting conditions.
Right.
You need to be able to shoot prone on your bipod or off of your pack,
Yeah.
whatever your hunting situation is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and go in the mountains and shoot that far.
Oh yeah.
Take a steel plate out, run your four-wheeler out there, put out a steel stand target, ride back up to 700 yards. If you think that's what you're going to be shooting at and your
Mhm.
bullet will perform at that distance, go practice that in the mountains, in
Yeah.
the wind. See if you can even hit it.
Yeah.
It will open your eyes.
Well,
But no, I was just going to finish what I was saying there about the bullets. At whatever range that bullet, say 700 yards, at that distance, if that bullet crosses below 1,800 feet per second, anything past that 700 yard mark, that bullet is not guaranteed to mushroom and open up and expand properly, which ensures a quick, clean kill. At that point, the bullet might not open at all.
mhm.
It's just going to penetrate straight through it. It's not going to open. There's no expansion. There's no hydrostatic disruption inside the animal. You're basically shooting the animal with a full metal jacket,
Yeah.
which is not ethical.
Right.
Imagine shooting an animal with a field point out of your bow.
Yeah.
There's no
You wouldn't do
expansion. Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it because there's no cutting surface.
Yeah.
There's no damage inside the
Right.
animal. The same thing applies to a bullet when it crosses below its minimum expansion velocity.
Mhm.
So know what that distance is. Figure out what your minimum expansion velocity is on whatever bullet you've got, whether it's a hammer bullet or a Federal Terminal Ascent or a
Mhm.
Barnes TTSX or Nosler AccuBond or whatever you decide to shoot, or a Hammer Hunter or
Or the new Hammer HHT, which has
Right.
minimum expansion
Right.
velocity of 1,700 feet per second.
Right.
right. So some bullets that are designed for a little bit extended range shooting for hunting
Mhm.
scenarios have a lower minimum expansion velocity.
Yeah.
Some down to 1,500 and
1,300
even 1,300 feet
Yeah.
per second.
Yeah.
for the
and that-
ABLRs.
And that extends that ethical performance of the
Mhm.
bullet as long as you can accurately put it on target.
Yeah.
So understand all that, run it through a ballistics calculator, know your velocity out of your rifle that's going to shoot that bullet, and then look at your calculator and figure out that cutoff before you get to the field and you wonder, I wonder if it's going to open at 800.
Now, I'm going to add one more and make
Okay.
sure you recognize the condition change
Yes.
that you're going to experience, because I'll tell you right now, if you are setting up your rifle in Fairbanks, which is
Mhm.
440 feet above sea level,
Right.
and then you jump up into the mountains at 4,000 feet above sea level, your ballistics are going to be different.
Mhm.
The
Right.
air is going to be thinner. Your powder in different temperatures may burn differently, giving you different velocities. You're going to your bullet's going to fly sometimes farther,
Mhm.
sometimes closer, depending on the
Right.
density of the air.
Right.
So knowing those environmental conditions that you're going to be in during the hunt,
Mhm.
and that's where I like what you said about actually going into the mountains
Yeah.
and seeing if you can even hit it, because
Yep.
that's that verification. You know, we
Mhm.
tell people all the time to verify.
Yeah.
For anybody wondering, a quick tactic to apply this to your hunt. We had talked about finding the caribou, figuring out which direction they're going to be heading, and then
Mhm.
staging up in that area, right?
Yeah.
One thing I have done multiple times that has proved very helpful is once I'm set up in an area, it's really simple. You just take your rangefinder after you have figured out your ethical range and you know exactly what we call that the kill zone is.
Mm-hmm.
Then once you're seated and you know where you're going to be sitting, you take your rangefinder and you identify landmarks
Yep.
at known ranges.
Yes.
Because it might not be a big landmark, but there might be a little tiny bush,
Yep.
right down the hill from you. There
Yep.
might be another tree, a little
Right.
spindly tree off to the other side of the hill. There might be,
Caribou trail.
a river or a ravine, off to the side.
Mhm.
And you can gauge, okay, once the caribou are past that bush, they're within my ethical range.
Right.
If they come in from this side or this side or this side, you build a circle around you of landmarks
Yep.
that you know the distance of.
Right.
So when they cross that bush, they're at 450 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start planning your hunt.
Right.
But if you see them and they're twice the distance you are from that bush, they might look closer at that range, especially when there's
Uh-huh.
not many other points of reference.
Right.
But you know better than to take that shot.
Yeah.
That gives you that definitive line
Mm-hmm.
that the caribou have to be this close to me
Mm-hmm.
in order for me to take a shot.
Right. Right.
And that will help you avoid a lot of misses.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't think, if you think they're closer than they are, you're gonna miss.
Yep.
It'll avoid a lot of wounded caribou and
Yep.
lost caribou,
Yep.
and it'll really just make the hunt a lot more ethical and a lot more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That kind of adds that foundation to it.
Well,
So-
there's something satisfying to me anyway, and I know for us here, and I'm sure for a lot of hunters in general, there's something really satisfying about planning your equipment,
Mhm.
learning your ethical distance that you can reliably kill at.
Mhm.
Okay, and then you go out in the field, you have a plan, you execute said plan, and you kill an animal cleanly, one shot, done.
Yep.
It's over. You know that everything worked just right.
It's the best feeling in the world.
That is just a sigh of, I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I planned it. I did my research.
Yep.
I listened to this guy's podcast about how to do this. You
Right,
know,
right.
I learned how to kind of build an infield shooting plan and how I'm going to plan this
Mhm.
whole final of the hunt. And I did everything right.
Yeah.
Now, sure, everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes that first shot, you don't read the wind right. Your shot drifts back into the guts, rack another round, hold a little bit for wind, shoot it again.
Right. Yeah.
Now, we talked about how caribou aren't hard to kill. Just to kind of wrap up the whole guns discussion, any normal deer cartridge from the lower 48 is going to kill a caribou.
Yeah.
But like James mentioned, it's going to limit your range depending on what you've got.
Mhm.
A 243 is a great whitetail rifle,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be as effective at any kind of distance for caribou.
Right.
Number one, they're over twice the size of a whitetail buck if you shoot a big caribou bull.
Mhm.
And you don't have that extended range ability, and it really doesn't perform as well in the wind.
Yeah.
But if you've got anything from like a 270, a 30-06, even a 6.5 Creedmoor is a fine choice. I know.
Gotta quit bringing that up.
James just hates it that I bring up 6.5 Creedmoor, but hey, it works. It works just fine.
6.5 is not a bad caliber, but I am just going to go on the record and say a PRC is a much better hunting
You know
round.
what's even better than that? The RPM by Weatherby.
The RPM by Weatherby is a very good one. It's basically the ballistic twin to a PRC.
A little better.
It's
If you
basically the ballistic twin to a PRC.
If you hand load,
load,
you can hop it up a little bit faster than a PRC. And then if you want to go crazy, you can get a 26 Nosler and burn your barrel out.
Or a 6.5 300.
Or a 6.5 300.
And the reason I say that is because of the distance that you may have to shoot at these caribou. You know, the bullet puttering out to a point where it's not going to expand properly.
Yeah.
That's where I say having that little bit of added velocity for me makes it a lot more safe. And I would say honestly for wind bucking, 6.5 would probably be my minimum. I would say that for me is when you get into that bullet style, that design where it's just going to buck the wind like nothing else. You know, it's kind of very designed for that.
A 264 bullet diameter with a weight of over 140 grains with a boat tail and a polymer tip is going to have a very good BC.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Very good.
Something like a Hornady ELDX or Hammer has what, 133 grain option?
I think it's 137.
Okay. But yeah, something, and that's a mono metal, so it's going to be very long for its weight.
Yeah.
But the 264s in that, you know, high 130 grain and even up over 140 grain is going to be a good choice, ballistically speaking. It's going to buck the wind real well for its weight. It's a very efficient round slicing through the air.
You can be a lot more sure of your shot.
284 is the same way.
Right.
A 284 with a 160 or better is a very good performing bullet in the wind. And that's why I've shot that 7 Rem mag that I've got for years. I've shot a lot of caribou with it, especially caribou. I know I've killed more caribou. Well, no, I don't know if I've killed more caribou or deer with that gun, but at any rate, I've killed most of my caribou with that rifle.
Right.
And anything over that 160 grain range, I've thought is the perfect blend of weight and power, but speed and flat shooting and buck in the wind. I really like the 284 caliber. And the other thing is, and we mentioned this earlier in the show, you're probably going to, at some point, if you caribou hunt enough, you're going to run into some bears. Yeah. Not that you've got to be afraid of them, but if you decide that you're going to kill a black bear or even a grizzly bear on your caribou hunt, then that 284 to me gives me a little bit more peace of mind that I'm going to be able to just thump that bear a lot better in my mind than I will with a 6.5 Creedmoor. That's where I kind of differentiate between a 264 and a 284. That 7 Rem mag just has a lot more juice. And yes, a 264 caliber bullet will absolutely kill a grizzly bear.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I prefer a 284 caliber gun.
It just gives you that added insurance, that added boost.
And there's plenty of guys that caribou hunt with a 338 or a 300 Win Mag is a very popular choice. It's one of the most common cartridges up here in Alaska. 300 Win Mag, 300 Short Mag. You know, Mariah's shot a 300 Short Mag for quite a while now. And that's a fine choice as well. If you get up into like a 30 caliber round and you hand load for like your 30-06, something like a 200 grain bullet that's going to have a little higher BC on it. It's going to buck the wind a bit better. It's going to slow it down, but you're going to make up for that in the efficiency that it has going through the air. And a 300 Win Mag, you can buy factory 200 grain bullets for pretty easily now.
Even the 180s, honestly, they'll fly just fine. At any range most people are reasonably able to shoot at. Yeah, exactly. But again, it all comes back to knowing the performance limitations of whatever you shoot. What you can ethically hit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, back on the rangefinder thing real quick, going to archery. I still remember the first time going up on that archery hunt with my dad and him telling me, he gave me, or he let me use his rangefinder on and off. I think he just had the one, but he said, we didn't get any caribou that trip, but he said, hey, the distances are deceiving, and he wasn't talking 400 to 1,000. He was talking 40 to 80 or 20 to 40.
Yeah.
It seems insane.
Yep.
And to somebody who shoots targets in their backyard or shoots archery all the time is going to think we're crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But anybody who's been up there will testify that when you think it's 40 yards, it's 80 yards.
Mhm.
And there's times when you think it's 80 yards and it's 40 yards.
Yeah.
It's crazy and ridiculous. And
it's just that point of reference, man.
there is no point of reference.
There's no gauge to base it off of. So you're just guessing basically based on
Right.
how big the animal is, and that's subjective.
Yeah.
right.
So
Quick story.
Yeah.
Just to give an example of this, and this just proves this point and puts the final nail in the coffin for this illustration. I heard a story from an old timer guide that had a client up in on the north side of the Brooks Range, and this was probably 30, 40 years ago.
mhm.
And the guide, this was his first time guiding a hunt up in that part of the state. He was young at the time. He was just getting started, and he's long since retired, but by now. But I bumped into him one day. I met him, and he told me this crazy story, and I couldn't believe it at first. But then, as I hunted more up there, I found out how it could be true. So he said that he had a client up there, and he had a grizzly bear tag. And one day they got up out of their tent and they looked up on the hillside, and they said they saw a really nice blonde grizzly bear.
Mm.
Well, he didn't pull out his binoculars or anything because the thing looked like it was a long ways away and they had to gain some ground, and it looked like it was kind of walking away from them. Well, they approached, and the bear didn't really seem to get any bigger. And they got closer and they realized they were at the bottom of the hill and the bear was seemingly within a few hundred yards. He said, at that point, I pulled up my rifle scope because he didn't even own binoculars at the time.
Mhm.
And he said, I looked through the rifle scope and it was a marmot.
What?
What?
Him and the client both thought that this marmot was a grizzly bear
At
Oh my.
at range.
at range.
Yeah.
It was so deceptive. There was nothing to reference it to.
Right. Yeah.
But they made this great stock and for folks that don't know what a marmot is, it's basically a groundhog
Yeah.
that we have up here.
Yeah.
A big groundhog. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the right color.
Yeah.
In the morning sun, he just
Mhm.
he thought, and I think that was in the Brooks Range, but it was somewhere up north, in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I could have my location off a little bit, but point being, there was no terrain variation anywhere except
Yeah.
hills, no brush, no nothing. They were in the wide open in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
They thought it was a grizzly bear. So if that doesn't tell you something, okay, I'll use one of my own stories. I was sheep hunting a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was by myself, and there were some clouds rolling through in the mountains, and I couldn't quite tell how far away this particular rock face was. And I'm just kind of panning over things with my spotter, just trying to pick through the fog and see if I can see any sheep through the fog on the mountainside. And I kept seeing something move its head, and I thought, hey, that's I think that's a sheep. And I stared at that thing in full power in my spotter for, it had to have been at least 20 minutes. I just stared at it, and I saw his head move, and I saw him kind of adjust and stand up at one point, I thought, and then lay back down and kind of turn his head and look around. Well, the clouds cleared, and it was a marmot up in the rocks.
Really?
And just with no reference, just trying to look
Mhm.
through the fog, and there was, there's no
Color
trees.
distortion. and
There's
all
no
that. Yeah.
trees.
Right.
There's no brush up there. I couldn't have. I thought it was a sheep.
Yeah.
And it was a real light colored marmot. It was actually very light colored.
Mm.
But just case in point, it can happen to anybody. But perspective and terrain really throws you for a loop.
Right.
So be prepared for that.
Yeah. And so hopefully we've covered most of the hunting tactics at this point.
Yeah.
I hope so.
But let's dive into the reason a lot of us like to hunt caribou,
Mm-hmm.
which is the meat.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong. They're a really, really good looking deer species. I think the antlers look great. I love looking at giant caribou racks,
Mm-hmm.
but I like eating them even more.
Mhm.
Not the racks, but the meat.
It'd be tough to eat there, James.
Yep. And
desperate times.
desperate times. But and so what can people expect from the meat depending on time of year?
Yeah.
Because as we talked about, the season goes from early August
Yeah.
all the way, in most cases, through the end of March. That's a big difference.
Yes.
So in most cases, what I would call the best tasting caribou
Mm-hmm.
with the most fat on it
Mm-hmm.
is going to be during that August, early September timeframe.
Yep.
That's majority, pre-rut.
Yep.
That's when they've been fattening up through the summer.
Yep.
They're getting ready for winter. They haven't burned off any of that chasing cows around.
Right.
Mhm.
And you would be amazed at the amount of fat you can find on a caribou compared to
yeah.
what most people will say
Oh yeah.
during that early part of the season.
Mhm.
And I gotta say, that's probably the best tasting caribou
Yeah.
right there.
Yep.
Into the rut, they do start to lose a lot of that fat. The
Oh, yeah.
bulls do
Quickly.
very quickly. They stop eating. They're just focused on chasing cows. They're fighting. They're
Mhm.
exerting themselves a lot more. They're just going to burn that off a lot more.
Testosterone is just pumping.
Yeah, and anybody that's hunted anything during a heavy rut period knows
Oh, yeah.
that the meat just tastes differently.
Yeah.
But you're going to hear a lot of people say that it basically renders them inedible,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and that's simply just not true.
Right.
A lot of that has to do with field care.
Yep.
A lot of that has to do with the ethical take
Mhm.
of the animal as well.
Mhm.
Like we talked about before, if you don't make a good shot and you just kind of wound it to death,
Mhm.
that's going to impact the taste.
And really, that's true with any animal.
That is very true.
If you
Yeah.
gut shoot any animal and it runs and lives on until you put it down 15, 20 minutes later when you can finally close in for the coup de grace,
Mhm.
it's going to be different because it's got all that adrenaline pumping through it.
Yeah,
It's
it knows
fighting,
it's gonna die.
It's fighting for survival. It's starting to break down.
Mhm.
And as that adrenaline pumps through that meat,
Mhm.
it's just gonna taste a little bit different. There's nothing you can do about that at that point.
Yeah.
Don't throw it away. Don't discard it.
Yeah.
But just understand a quicker, cleaner kill is going to help keeping that. It will keep that from happening.
Mhm.
A quick, clean shot will not allow that to happen.
Right. And then later on in the caribou seasons, as you get into the winter hunts
Mhm.
over the winter time, a lot of those hormones from the rut will start to calm down.
Yeah.
A lot of that meat will clear up from the adrenaline and
Yes.
everything, but the fat reserves don't really come back.
Right.
If you shoot a winter caribou, expect it to be extremely lean,
Very, very lean.
very lean.
I mean, it's a hard life.
Yeah.
It's a hard
being
life
a caribou
for
in the
'em.
mountains.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they don't stop moving in the wintertime. They're
Yeah.
out there trudging through belly, chest deep snow.
Mhm.
I mean, it looks miserable. Yeah, they're in the wind all the time. It would be tough enough for a person to live like a caribou from spring till fall.
Mhm.
It'd be just about impossible in the wintertime to
Yeah.
live where they live in those kind of conditions on the move all the time.
Right.
It's insane how much they move in the wintertime still.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say to that note, I haven't had a bad one.
Right. Yeah.
And I've shot them in September before in mid rut and just after the rut. I had one that tasted a little bit different.
Mhm.
I didn't think it was bad.
Mhm.
It didn't smell bad when we cooked it. You could just tell it had a little bit stronger flavor to it,
Right.
but nothing that I felt was not edible.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from, honestly, people that just don't really like wild game in general.
Yeah.
And so
Caribou-
anything a little bit off is just
Caribou tends to have a little stronger flavor to it anyway.
it does. Yeah.
Even like a good early August caribou still just has a distinct caribou flavor to it. It's not that mild moose or deer or sheep meat that we might be used to.
Right.
And it's certainly not the same as beef. It's just got a little bit stronger flavor to it, which none of us mind. And if you're used to eating caribou, then you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
It's just a little bit different.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I've shot them in the wintertime too, and like you said, there is no fat.
Yeah.
At all.
Yep.
In August, I think it's awesome. I've even ground up the fat with the meat after I bring it out.
Oh,
I don't take all the fat off the meat. When I skin the caribou out in the butchering process, I leave all the fat on the meat and I'll just grind all that up. Instead of buying like pork fat and things like that to add into the grind.
Yeah.
I just grind all of the animal's fat in with it.
So kind of fun fact, I do that with just about every animal.
Oh yeah.
Moose,
me too.
Caribou,
me too.
Bear if I get one that has a good amount of fat on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason to me why I've always done that is because it just feels that's the fat that's supposed to be with the meat.
Yeah,
right?
I feel the same way.
Putting pig suet in it or anything like that is just, I don't know. I've done it before, and I don't judge people that do that.
No.
If that's your chosen flavor, it's your hunt, it's your meat. You do what you want with it.
Yep.
But for me, I really enjoy just using the fat that came with the animal. And a lot of people that might be thinking we're crazy right now talking about this, there's a lot of misconceptions that go on with animal fats, like wild game animal fats, that they sour, they'll go rancid after 6 months in the freezer.
Especially deer species.
Yeah, especially deer species. If you take care of it correctly and you store it correctly, I'm here to tell you, I've had burger in my freezer for a year and a half that is mixed with nothing but moose fat. And it's fine.
Oh yeah.
There's no souring, there's no rancidness, there's no off smells, there's no off tastes. If you like moose, you'll enjoy it. And it's honestly, it's the best fat you can put in the meat, I think.
Yeah.
Now, if you just can't stomach it, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's up to you. That's your hunt.
Yeah.
But that's what I do. And I encourage people, if you haven't tried it,
yeah,
definitely do try it.
Yeah.
The big thing though, as far as maintaining the quality of the meat before you bring it home, is just keeping it clean. You want to try to keep as much hair off that meat as possible.
Yes.
And you don't want to just quarter that caribou out and throw it right on the tundra and get those leaves and grass,
all the
lichen and all that other stuff all over the meat. Bring out a tarp, set it on a tarp, make sure it goes straight from under the hide, coming out onto the tarp, clean it off, get all the extra stuff off of it before you put it in the game bags. And then when you get it back to wherever you're going to hang it up for a little bit, whether that's back at your camp, if you're able to shoot more than one, or maybe you're with the party and other people are still trying to hunt. When you go back and you hang it up, make sure it's protected from bugs, make sure it's protected from sun, make sure it's not going to spoil.
Don't use cheesecloth game bags that flies can still lay eggs on the meat through the bag.
Right.
Exactly. One trick I learned years ago that it has proven invaluable is bringing a spray bottle with white vinegar in it. You spray down, once you get it back to camp and you're hanging that meat up, you go through meticulously and you pick out all the twigs and all the hair and all the everything off of it, and you spray it down with white vinegar. When you're cooking the meat later on, you cannot taste it at all. It doesn't change the flavor of the meat at all, but what it does is it kind of keeps the flies and keeps the bugs off of it long enough for it to crust up to where it's naturally protected from
it. It helps it crust up a little bit faster.
You can get a game preserver like powder mix that you mix into a spray bottle. If somebody's afraid of using the white vinegar or something, it's like a citrus base.
Yeah.
And you just spray your meat down with that in the same way. And it does the same thing. It actually kind of forms a little bit of a crust and it keeps the flies off.
Yeah.
So also black pepper works in that regard as well. If you don't want to spray it down with anything, bring like a Ziploc bag of black pepper and take handfuls of that and then just rub that game bag down. If you have cheesecloth game bags, or if you're just hanging the meat exposed from like a meat hanging pole and you just want all the airflow that you can get, you don't want it in a bag for now. You're just trying to get it to cool off on the bone.
Yep.
Rub it down with black pepper. That'll keep the flies off of it as well.
Yeah.
Not quite as well as like a spray-on treatment will.
Right.
But it's better than nothing.
Well, and salt too.
Yeah.
Because what salt will do is salt will pull that moisture out of that outer layer of the meat
Mhm.
and just kind of amplify the crusting effect to where
Yep.
it'll crust overnight sometimes.
Yep.
To where it's protected from, and the flies just can't lay their eggs through that. They can't penetrate that crust. And the biggest thing, you can hang your meat for a couple of days.
Mhm.
Fresh meat, fresh off the hunt, you can hang. If you're going to be back there for a couple more days,
Mhm.
you're usually okay. But the biggest thing is keeping it out of any kind of direct sunlight,
Mhm.
keeping it out of, keeping it like you had pointed out with high airflow. The
Mhm.
more airflow you can get, the
Mhm.
better.
Yep.
And then you'll be fine. Keep it clean, keep it out of the sun,
Yep.
keep the bugs off of it,
Keep it
and you're
dry.
going to keep it dry. That's a
Yep.
big one.
Yep.
And you're going to have just fine as far as meat quality goes.
Yep. Yep. And obviously, the later in the year it gets, once you get into September, you get those nice, cool, crisp nights.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to really help. Just
Oh, yeah.
immediately chill that meat down over the first night. It'll be cool by the morning, usually, if you have it hung. If you can't hang it, another great tip is if you're on a road system hunt and you're going to spend the night and you've killed a caribou, take your ATV rack, loading ramp, and take the game bags and lay them on top of that ATV ramp in the bed of your truck.
Yeah.
So it's off the bed.
Mhm.
You've got airflow over it and under it, and then
Yep.
keep it covered so that it's not going to get rained on. Maybe just put a tarp over the bed of your truck.
Yep.
But that way you can just leave the tailgate open. Air will get in there and circulate through there. It has a chance to kind of dry. I do that whenever I go on like a road system caribou hunt where I've got an ATV in the bed of my truck. Even if I don't bring my four-wheeler, I'll still bring my ramps just so that if I don't have anywhere to hang it overnight, I can just throw it on that rack in the bed
Yeah.
and keep air circulating around that meat.
Mhm.
That's your biggest thing, is get airflow around it, and then also keep it dry.
Yeah.
If you're on an August hunt and you got to spend the night somewhere, you have nowhere to hang it. You have nowhere to kind of build like a little spruce pole rack on the ground to lay it on to get airflow around it. Another thing you can do, if you're in a pinch and it's in August and it's going to be hot and it's not going to cool off overnight like you want it to, put it in game bags, put it in contractor bags, and then go stick it in a creek somewhere.
Yeah.
That'll help cool it off overnight. It's not the best thing. It's best to let it cool to ambient temperature first and then put it in the water in a contractor bag.
Right.
But that way you're not soaking the meat, you're not getting it wet, but that cold water temperature is going to help drop the temperature of that meat as well.
Yeah.
That's something you can do if you're in a pinch.
And the more crusted it is, the more
Mhm.
protected it is.
Exactly.
And so really, once it has a nice solid leathering on the outside of it, keeping it cool is really all you've got to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Keeping it out of direct sunlight, anything
Mhm.
like that. I mean, if you're just waiting for your plane to come back and pick you up, you're going to
Yep.
be just fine.
Yep. Yep.
And those are the biggest tips. And then when you get back to town, make sure you take care of it nicely there too.
Yeah.
Don't just leave it in the back of the truck for
No.
the night or the weekend until you can get to it.
Hang it up
Hang it up
in the
make-
shade.
Make sure it's cared for.
Yep.
The coolest place you can find to hang it is where it should go.
Yep.
Whether that be in your garage, as long as you're not around a bunch of chemicals,
Right.
cleaner sprays or anything like that you would use in a garage. If you have a relatively clean working space in there, it's a good place. Keeps it
Mhm.
away from most of the bugs. Keeps it out of the sunlight.
Right.
Mhm.
Under a couple of big shady trees is
Mhm.
just fine too.
Yeah.
And really, as long as you take care of it, like you said, you've never had one that you would deem inedible.
No.
And I think, and I never have either.
Right.
And I think in most cases, when you talk to people that claim to have never taken an inedible
Mhm.
bull caribou, that's the case with all of them. Is they take
It's proper
extreme
field care.
precaution in
Right.
taking care of the meat,
Right.
because that's the biggest reason I'm out there. I mean, yeah,
Yep.
like I said, it's cool to shoot a big, nice, mature caribou.
Mhm.
They look awesome. They're
Yeah.
an awesome animal to just go out there and watch in the wild. It's a great experience. It's a great hunt.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a fun
But-
way to see a lot of animals too.
Yeah, but making sure you bring as much of that meat back
Yeah.
in good, usable condition is the ultimate goal.
Yes.
That's the ultimate goal of hunting.
Yep.
Is it's a resource collection system.
Yep.
Um,
I would say one more thing too for some of the newer guys that are possibly coming up. I know we talked about this earlier, but if it's your first time hunting caribou here this fall in Alaska, make sure that you know what all of the salvage requirements for meat are in the regs. You have to take out all edible meat off of your game animals. And that is specifically defined in the Fish and Game reg book.
Yeah.
Make sure that you know what you have to take out. In some units with caribou, you have to take out the ribs on the bone.
Mm-hmm.
Others, you can bone them out in the field if you don't want to bring out the rib cage.
Right.
Know that before you go out.
Right.
You don't want to get out there and not have a bone saw or some kind of a way to get the rib cage off of the animal carcass and then realize that that's what you have to do. That's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
I've heard of guys that have gotten written up over that, and they've gotten written up over a lot less. And especially on some of these higher traffic caribou hunting areas, the troopers will be out there checking the harvested animals, and they will ask you, they'll pull you over if they see meat in the bed of your truck or a rack sticking out. All right, let's pull out your game bags, empty them out. I want to see what you took.
Yep.
And if you don't have enough meat, you're in trouble.
And they will make you go back to the gut pile with them.
Oh, yeah.
And show them where you shot it.
Yep.
And the standard for wanton waste in the state of Alaska is if they can take their knife and scrape off any edible meat off those bones, you have a high potential of getting a ticket.
Yeah.
Even if it just goes in a burger bag
Yep.
and you're just throwing it in a game bag to be burgered up when you get back to town.
Yep.
It needs to be taken off that animal.
Yep.
And as it should be, honestly. I mean,
absolutely. So let's talk about kind of the last thing here with caribou. You shoot a caribou, you walk up to it. The first thing you're going to notice is, holy smokes, that thing's gut is huge. Caribou are very bloaty creatures.
Pot-bellied deer.
They it seems like as soon as you shoot them, you know, the rib cage collapses, the air goes out of the lungs, and they're laying on their side there, and the gut is just a big balloon.
It is.
They bloat instantaneously. It's like their gut just starts to rot immediately. And it has to do with how they digest their food and how they chew up their food and how that process works. I believe that caribou chew the cud. So part of that is the food that's not digested yet. There's gas in that, and then they regurgitate that back up to then re-chew, to then swallow, to then process through their digestive tract. Well, when you kill them, they immediately start to bloat up and get real gassy. And every caribou hunter has done this, where you're making your first cut. If you're making, if you're going with the gutless method, which if you're not going to do a shoulder mount, that's the most common way. I would recommend not going in from the top down. You're going to get more hair and everything.
That way,
If you're not preserving the cape for anything, if you're not going to do any kind of a mount, use the gutless method.
Yeah.
Go watch a video on that. Learn how to do that. At some point, we'll have an in the field video demonstrating that at some point in the future. But if you use the gutless method and you're making that first cut up the bottom of the belly, you're going to nick that stomach and you're going to get a face full of gassy air. And it's just the worst.
It really is.
Really, really
air
stinks.
if you're lucky.
Yeah, air if you're lucky, greens if you're not.
You're right.
But the problem is, guys don't understand that. They don't understand how tight that stomach is. They make a cut and they spill guts all in the cavity of that animal.
Yeah.
And they get that garbage on all the meat. And they complain about how their caribou meat, when they get back home, just smells rancid.
Yeah.
Well, it's covered in guts.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what you want to do. So be very, very careful to not do that. And if you nick the guts, change tactics, rip the guts out.
Yep.
If you cut the guts open and that's getting on the meat, your mission is now not to do the gutless method. Now you're gutting the animal before you do anything else.
Yeah.
You need to get that off of the animal. Reach in there, scoop that junk off the meat, clean it off as soon as possible. If you have a water source nearby, as soon as you get all the meat off the carcass, take it down, wash it off.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be wet, but it's better to be wet and then have to dry it out later than it is to be covered in gut and bile and intestinal fluid than it is to just have a little bit of water on it. That'll dry.
Yeah.
The guts and that acid and that stomach juice is going to permeate into that meat, and that can make a caribou inedible.
Yeah. The biggest way I've seen or I've tried to avoid doing that is, and especially in with lower 48 deer hunting, you see a lot of guys going in from the rump back towards the chest when they're gutting out an animal.
Yep.
I do the opposite. So my first incision is always up by the sternum. And then I'll take 2 fingers and just spread that, I'll make the incision just long enough I can get my fingers in there and spread them apart. And then you basically just kind of run that blade in between your 2 fingers, pushing that hide out.
Yes.
And what you'll find is after the first couple of inches of pushing that cut down the underside of the animal, you'll feel where your fingers are pushing the hide up from that membrane.
Yes.
And that will allow you to just barely keep the tip of that knife underneath just the hide.
Yeah.
And you'll go right around that paunch.
Don't shove the whole blade of the knife into the animal and then just start ripping back.
Yep. Yeah. You'll feel the paunch start pushing against the hide as you cut through just the hide, and it's seamless. I mean, you get to the end of it and you're good to go. And you can start peeling it back.
Yeah. It's going to be tight as a balloon.
Oh, yeah.
When you're doing that. I mean, you will know what is gut and what is.
And it might even start pushing out from behind your hand. Not to be too graphic.
Oh, yeah.
It'll start ballooning out through that slit.
Yeah. As soon as you cut a hole for it, it's going to start popping out.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep. But managing the guts is a big thing. I typically do gut my caribou. Just kind of to avoid that because it's such a bloated area. Yeah. I do tend to pull the guts out before I start processing, and then I'll separate the carcass from the gut pile, just to avoid any possibility of that. The other thing is, I would recommend people, if you're going to come up all the way up here to hunt a caribou, keep the hide. Yeah. It doesn't weigh that much. Yeah. It's not like a moose hide or something like that.
Right.
And there's a ton of uses for caribou hide. I mean, 1, they just look cool. But 2, if you're just looking for like a really awesome, just something to throw over yourself on the couch or something like that. 1, what's cooler than something you killed to do that with? But 2, caribou hair is the hollow follicle hair. And so it's very warm. Yeah. And so you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. Yeah. I would highly recommend everybody bring that out of the field.
Yeah. Even just on that note, for folks that might not have a picture of what that might look like, if you make all your cuts when you're taking the animal apart, skin it like you're using the gutless method. Make a ring around each of the knee joints. Skin that back on the inside of the leg. Connect that cut to your center cut on the chest, and then cut the hide off somewhere up on the neck.
Yeah,
and you'll have that white hair up on the neck. Then as it turns to gray, and then back to that kind of real dark gray on the body. You get those accent lines. That I really, really like the colors in caribou. And especially as you get later in the season when the hair gets longer and that mane turns real white on all the bulls. That is really, really pretty. It makes for a beautiful wall hanger.
Yeah. Even if you just stretch it out on a wall somewhere, it looks really, really nice.
Really nice.
Well, all right. Well, I think that just about wraps up caribou talk. So hopefully we have addressed a lot of you guys' questions. If we didn't, definitely feel free to write in again. And again, if you go to thenorthernhunter.com, we have a nice contact us button there.
Yep.
Our email is info@thenorthernhunter.com, or if you reach out to either one of our socials that we have currently, it's @thenorthernhunter on Facebook or Instagram. And we do our best to reply as fast as we can. While you're on the website, hopefully contacting us, definitely get some Northern Hunter merch. The shop page is now live. We have some hoodies and hats and shirts and things like that nature on there. There's more designs coming. And leave us a rating, and share this with your friends. If you know anybody coming up here for a caribou hunt.
Yeah.
And check out the partners page on our website too. Mo put a lot of work into that. It looks real nice. And Dalton, you want to tell them a little bit about the people on there?
Yep. If you shop from our sponsors, we've got Yukon River Knives, Hammer Bullets, and Stealthy Hunter gear is all the same discount code, The Northern Hunter at checkout. Batum 907, our discount code is TNHP for the discount code at checkout. And then Weatherby Rifles in Sheridan, Wyoming is our remaining partner. No discount code there. But again, if you buy a rifle from them, let them know we sent you.
Absolutely. And, that helps us out. That helps these companies out. All of them are great American companies. They're some are big, some are small.
Yeah.
Really helps everybody out. And again, if you end up getting any of these products and using them in the field, definitely send us some pictures and some stories.
I just want to add one more thing. I've gotten a few Instagram messages from some listeners here in the last week or two. And I've had some good, back and forth conversations with folks that just have some questions about stuff that I've mentioned on the podcast before. And they've mentioned how they've recommended the show to their friends.
Mhm.
That is more effective at helping our show reach more folks than you might realize.
Oh, yeah.
You might just think, well, it's just one guy. Well, then he's going to have 3 guys that he works with that he's going to share it with.
Mhm.
Word of mouth does help us out a lot.
It does,
And we've got a lot of exciting things coming that we want as many folks as possible to
Yeah.
find out about the show and help contribute with questions and future episodes. Our whole goal here is to be educational and informational.
Absolutely.
We try to be entertaining sometimes.
Hopefully, y'all think so too.
all 3 of us are close friends. Mo and I share family relations.
Mhm.
but he says that with such enthusiasm. But I just want to reiterate to folks, thank you for writing in with all your content. We appreciate it.
Mhm.
Caribou, like James said, this is by far the most popular topic
Oh, yeah.
of a question that we've gotten.
Yeah.
So we hope it's been a help to you. Continue to reach out to us and recommend it to your friends. We can't thank you guys enough for making this possible.
Absolutely. Ratings and reviews also help a lot with spreading it on the
Tremendously.
algorithms.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
well, all right, guys. Well, until next week, get out there, get after it, and good luck. We'll see you there.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to StealthyHunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.